Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Market Open. We are live. It is Tuesday, August 25th. Thank you all for being here. We got a lot to talk about. We have a lot to talk about. We are green pre-market for a variety of reasons. It's been a couple of ugly days going back to Friday of last week, particularly because of the bond yield issue that we've been all focused on and all engaging with, the 10-year, 30-year. Obviously, this has become something that's been more pressing. I mean, more and more you hear, in general, the emphasis on bond yields in a world in which earnings growth has been the story all year. So the market didn't really care about bond yields. Today, we have a little bit of reprieve in the bond yields actually coming down. We're below 4.72, which is where we were yesterday, to 4.64, which is actually a pretty big deal because every tenth of a basis point really matters here. But it's for a few reasons. One of those reasons has to do with the Stanley Druckenmiller article that I think a lot of people heard about yesterday. If not, we will recap the article in its entirety. He wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal and basically called out what he thought was a gimmick by the Treasury with these buybacks. I think that's helping yields kind of calm down a little bit because you have a voice of reason who's such a publicly known figure saying, hey, enough is enough. We need to do something about the fiscal policy and spending that we have in Washington. But also, we have some updates on this Iran deal that I think are actually relatively bullish. And quite frankly, if I were to guess why yields are coming down, why oil is down 3%, which is why the airlines are all up right now. United Airlines up about 3%, American Airlines as well. I think that's the actual reason. The real reason why stocks are green, why the 10-year is down, why oil is down, and quite frankly, why Bitcoin's down. Bitcoin ran up to 81,200 yesterday when the 10-year started peaking above 4.7 late last night. The 10-year is now down, and the sort of risk-on trade that was becoming more risk-on during something that's obviously a risk-off type of event, aka the 10-year peaking, is now going back to risk-off as the 10-year is going down, which is turning more into risk-on. So just like bonds and yields have an inverse relationship, it's kind of like Bitcoin is having an inverse relationship with risk-on, risk-off events. Same thing with gold. But I think the Iran updates from last night are kind of why things are calming down in the macro and why equities are going higher. And so we will talk about that and get into it. It's been a ugly couple days, but Micron, that's up 2%. Tesla's up 1%. AppLovin, that's up 0.5%. SoFi's up 1%. Intel's up 3%. Bloom Energy got to 185 yesterday, hit 220 in the pre-market's 213 right now. AAOI's up 4%. I mean, you're seeing a lot of names get some love. Dix, unfortunately, is not. They are down 17%. People are not buying shoes as much, is what Dix said. So we'll get into their earnings. But one of many examples that the consumer is weak. Then you look at the makeup companies, the consumer is fine. People are buying makeup. So obviously it's a little bit more stock specific and sector specific when trying to figure out what's happening with consumer discretionary. But there are some companies that are struggling. Dix right there down 18.29% of the pre-market. We will talk about that. And Bitcoin losing that $81,000 level that we had yesterday. Yeah, kind of similar to Nike. Nike right there. That's down 2.7% as well. All right, let's get into it. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you all for being here. We are rocking the hair again 2 days in a row. We'll see how long we rock the hair, but I didn't do anything to it. Just you know what, took off the hat and now we're rocking the hair. So maybe we keep the hair out for the long term here. We did see Bitcoin get up there last night. If you were awake at like 11:30, it was exciting to see. It's funny that it faded down when the 10-year came down, which should be risk on, but it ended up being risk off for Bitcoin because Bitcoin's going up with a risk off event. So, you know, the risk on tendency is kind of inverse, which is just kind of confusing, but it also does make sense. And so, you know, if the Bitcoin momentum actually stopped because the 10-year calms down, it would be so ironic, but it would also be so annoying because, you know, now people think that we're going to have some more crypto excitement. Nonetheless, we'll talk about it and we'll keep going from there. So let's start off with Drux. I think let's start off with Drux. And then we'll go deeper into what we got going on. So this was quite fascinating last night. Last night, I did not expect this. I don't think a lot of people expected this, but the Wall Street Journal came out with an op-ed from Druckenmiller. Well, real quick, before we get into Drux, let me actually give you guys the headline that I think is why stocks are green, because I know a lot of people are curious kind of what would be that momentum-driven catalyst. And I think it's this. The U.S. reportedly offered Iran a deal. Again, reportedly, not confirmed yet, but maybe this is happening. The U.S. reportedly offered Iran a deal to halt the siege and lift sanctions in exchange for reopening the Strait of Hormuz and ending proxy attacks. Now, Maybe this is true. Maybe this is not. Time will tell. But I think the fact that that news came out, you have a couple other sources also reporting that not exactly this same report, but something similar to the fact that the United States is trying to have a deeper conversation with Iran and offer them some type of concessions in order for Iran to take those concessions. Obviously, yesterday you had Bessent say that it's going to be economic D-Day and there's going to be a lot of economic pressure put onto the country, and any other country working with Iran is effectively going to be cutting off business with the United States. Maybe that's going to work. Maybe that's not. I mean, I do think there is a little bit more likelihood that that has some effectiveness, even though the Iranians obviously don't care that much about their economy. But if there is some type of deal that is negotiated, which once again, I don't think Trump has the leverage here. The bond market continues to say that you are not the boss of this. Then I think there will be some resolution. And if there is that resolution sooner than later, obviously that would be more risk on for stocks and better for bond yields to be coming down. So what did Druck say? This was the title of the Wall Street Journal article yesterday. Let the bond market speak. Rising interest rates are a signal of trouble ahead. Artificially suppressing it heightens the danger. Now, what's so interesting about this is the relationship that Druckenmiller has with Bessent. So before we get into that, let's just summarize what the article said in and of itself. First, he said that the decision to double long-dated bond buybacks looks less like liquidity management and more like an effort to push down long-term yields. He called it quasi-quantitative easing. There was no clear market dysfunction forcing intervention. Suppressing those yields risks weakening one of the few remaining forms of fiscal discipline in Washington. Lower borrowing costs reduce the pressure to deal with deficits, entitlement spending, and the broader debt trajectory. Essentially, Druckenmiller saying, get your fiscal house in order. The bond market is a way to tell you that it's not in order. Trying to artificially create these tricks by saying you're going to buy back bonds is not the way to solve this issue. Buying longer duration treasuries while funding the purchases with short-term bills effectively removes duration risk from the market, making it resemble a small form of quantitative easing. The concern is that once markets believe officials are defending a certain yield level, aka once the bond market investors believe that Bessent is always going to come in and like save the day, they may keep testing that commitment. He concludes by saying the better solution is to let the bond market set the price of government borrowing and address the underlying fiscal problem directly, reduce the deficit, reform entitlements gradually, and manage debt more responsibly. So what's so interesting about this is that Druckenmiller is a mentor to Bessent, and they've worked together in the past on hedge funds. In fact, in 2019, they even did a talk together where Druckenmiller essentially was saying exactly what he said in his article to Bessent. It looked like Bessent was agreeing with him, which is why this dynamic is so interesting, because it's almost like the mentor telling the mentee, hey, we talked about this for the past 30 years. This is the way I taught you how to think about the bond market, equities, the relationship with the Fed, the Treasury, et cetera. And you're doing everything against what you learned. And you can't really blame Bessent. I mean, he has no choice at this point if the war in Iran is not going to end. But it's almost like a disappointed dad being like, what is wrong with you? You know that this is wrong, but you're still engaging in this.
But there's one other problem with all this, and that's our government. Government responds to market signals too, and the clowns in Washington, unless they get a signal from the bond market, they're just going to keep spending. So for the first time in history, we have massive deficits and full employment. Estimates are this year there'll be $1 trillion. God help us if we get in a recession. If you just take the mean of what happens in a recession, that would go to $1.8 trillion. Debt to GDP has gone from 65 to 105. So you get the drift. So this is where we were going into this fall. I felt that Bernanke and Yellen in particular, there were so many opportunities.
He goes on to criticize the Treasury secretaries, the Secretary of Treasury, but sitting with him is in 5 years the next Secretary of the Treasury, which is Bessent. Listening to him, agreeing with what he's saying. So it was so interesting because you just have someone basically saying everything you're doing is wrong. You know that it's wrong. You know that this is not sustainable. You know that these gimmicks are not going to impress people that actually manage capital like myself, or that have access to a lot of people's ears when they want to learn about how to manage capital, aka Druckenmiller. And we're not falling for this shit. Like, this makes no sense. So from that perspective, I think that article got a little bit of the bond market to be excited that there's someone with a voice of reason coming out and saying that these, treasuries, quasi-quantitative easing buybacks are not going to actually be effective. Kevin Warsh is also a disciple of Druckenmiller. I mean, Bessent and Warsh worked together with Druckenmiller at his hedge fund years ago. So it's one of those things where it's like they've spent years and years and years working with this guy, understanding his principles. Druckenmiller is one of the best investors of all time, right? Average 30% a year for many years. He understands how a lot of this stuff works. He's not right all the time, but he's one of the greatest macro traders of all time. He obviously nailed a ton of macro trades back in the 2000s that netted him and his fund billions and billions of dollars. So when he speaks about bond yields and his argument is not that controversial. He's just like, guys, you can't stop what the bond market is telling you. Either get inflation down by ending the war, which is he didn't explicitly say, but implicitly that's what he was implying in the article, or let the bond market speak and let these yields go higher in order to curb entitlement spending, which no party is ready to do. But don't try to artificially suppress a situation. You can't just put a Band-Aid on this. This is something that has to bleed out and ultimately cause a little bit of pain so that we can get better in the future. But you can't just solve it by trying to act like it doesn't exist. And so I think that article, in conjunction with this Iran update about potentially getting a deal right here, is why stocks are great. Now, maybe it's a freak out or a fake out in terms of okay, these stocks are up right here, but you're not really going to see the level of momentum in these stocks continue to hold. I mean, we're up about 0.5% on the S&P 500. Can we actually hold up on the S&P 500? I mean, look at even Nebius. Nebius back to 220 in the pre-market, basically. It's one of those things where it's okay, this thing almost went below 200 yesterday. Now it's back up to 220. And it's you could understand why the call premiums are as aggressive as they are. You just have an intense level of volatility in these assets. And that's why the covered calls pay so much premium. But also the risk you're taking with these covered calls is that it's going to go up and down dramatically. It either rips your face off to the upside or it goes down and you don't have that much protection right here. So I kind of don't buy into this pre-market volatility to the upside yet. I would love to see this stuff actually hold during the market open because it's been faded so many times. But we've got to see if it can continue. NVIDIA right there up 1.25%. Obviously, we got NVIDIA earnings tomorrow, which is going to be really important. Meta right there is also up a little bit, 562. But the bond market is speaking, and some pressure is coming off of it this morning, which is why I think stocks are relatively green. Also, oil, I mean, it was at almost 87 yesterday. We're at 82 right now. We were at 81.50 an hour ago. So I feel like the oil market is just waiting to come down. It just needs that catalyst. And, right now we don't officially have that catalyst. But that is, I think, kind of the main argument here for why the broader markets are at least somewhat green in the pre-market right now. Druckenmiller was also mentored to Warsh. That is correct. He is also mentored to Warsh. And I think Kevin Warsh, well, let me play this right here. This was some analysis this morning on how the Fed is thinking about the Treasury is doing. And I think Kevin Warsh is in an awkward position because he also knows this doesn't make any sense because, again, he worked under Druckenmiller. But, what is he going to do? The Treasury is trying to do everything they can to suppress these yields because there's just not an end to this war yet.
What does Kevin Warsh need to say, or what do you anticipate he will say on Friday?
I think that this is a really pivotal speech for Chairman Warsh, that he was very effective in his first few months, banging the table and telling us we have an inflation problem. But then when he was asked, well, Mr. Chairman, what are you going to do to address this inflation problem? He wasn't willing to give any strategy. And I think that disjuncture between the problem and the lack of solution has left the markets frustrated and puzzled. And I think he's got to lay out in more detail how he's thinking about the economy, how he's thinking about the path of inflation going forward, and how he's thinking about monetary policy as a potential solution. And I think he can do that without resorting to traditional forward guidance.
Do you think he's going to have to comment on what Bessent has done or is doing? Because invariably what Bessent's doing to some degree could be making his job harder if the goal is to either leave interest rates where they are or to lower them.
I don't think that he's going to formally comment on the Bessent buyback operation. But I think he is very aware that through his last press conference, we saw the 30-year Treasury yield rise by 8 to 10 basis points over that period. And I think that the metric for success on this speech is whether he's able to get some traction in rebuilding his credibility as an inflation fighter, which I think could help bring down the 30-year Treasury yield.
I think the speech is really going to be a nothing burger. We'll obviously cover it live. I think it's on Friday. Should be at around 2 p.m.-ish, I think. It might be a little bit earlier, but we'll be live for it. It might be like a 10-minute speech. It might not be like some hour-long. I don't even think there's any questions he has to take there. So I don't think we're going to get much from it. I think the market's going to be on edge for whatever he says. But in general, like, now Bessent has made his life a little bit more difficult because he has to deal with what this buyback liquidity situation could mean for the 10-year. Obviously, if he can just get the market to believe that inflation is coming down, he's going to get a ton of bond buying as Bitcoin goes below 79,000, which will be a good thing. But he might have to maneuver it in a different way versus comment explicitly on what the Treasury is doing. By the way, Stanley Druckenmiller was Scott Bessent's boss in the 1990s, and Bessent returned to the firm as their chief investment officer in 2011. Druckenmiller also hired Kevin Warsh as a partner to his family office in 2011, where they worked together for more than a decade. So long experience Druckenmiller has working with both of these people who obviously have a lot of power in the government now with the Fed chair and the Treasury secretary. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Now, for those saying, why is Bitcoin down from 81,000? It is going to be so ironic if the reason Bitcoin was running this whole time. And again, I don't think this is the case, but man, if this is the case, if the 10-year going up was the reason for why Bitcoin was going up as an actual inflation hedge, which it hasn't acted like for the past 3 years, like inflation in 2022 was the highest in 40 years and Bitcoin was at 15,000, right? So like if it inversed the relationship and finally started being the inflation hedge and the 10-year going up is, the yields going higher is an example of the bond market being afraid of inflation, which means they might be pivoting to Bitcoin or gold. And now it's going down. Potentially, gold is also down right here in the pre-market because inflation might not be that much of a concern anymore. And again, I'm just saying it in hypotheticals. Obviously, we have a lot to do before inflation is not a concern because the 10-year yield is coming down, which is like your first signal of, okay, people are buying bonds, which means they might not be that afraid of inflation. Then that would be quite ironic. Now, the flip side is if the 10-year yield comes down and we actually get a rate cut, that would have more liquidity, which should be good for Bitcoin. But I think crypto's in a weird spot right now where we need to see a decent chunk of price action where Bitcoin diverges from bond yields and actually is able to independently go up outside of inflation expectations, which is what it's usually done in a bull market. But I think that's why it's down. I think the 10-year actually coming down is the yield coming down is actually why Bitcoin's coming down. Goldman Sachs raised their Nebius price target to $328 this morning. That's also part of the reason why it's up 4% from 286. So 286 to 328 is why you're seeing some of that green right now. I also think obviously the Clarity Act stuff is exciting for BTC, but now it's just a question of getting that stuff passed. Apple just announced a new Mac Mini with an M5 Ultra in the Mac Studio. Apple stock is up a little bit in the pre-market. I do not have hair gel in my hair. Does this look like there's gel to you guys? If you would see it, it would be like, I don't know. You know if there's gel. It's natural. I don't usually put gel in my hair. I feel like that stuff kind of messes up your hair sometimes. But M6 architecture, the 12-core M6 CPU includes 2 super cores, 4 performance cores, and 6 efficiency cores. Ultra Fusion M5 Ultra provides more than 4.4 terabytes of inter-die bandwidth and up to 1.2 terabytes of unified memory bandwidth. Again, the memory stocks took a pretty big hit yesterday because of Apple potentially trying to get memory from China. Also, YXMT is now trying to go public at a $5 billion valuation, or trying to raise $5 billion. I think the valuation would be much higher. Which is another Chinese company. CXMT already went public and they're worth like $500 billion. So you've got a lot of Chinese companies getting ready to get into this memory race. It is up to the United States in the next 2 weeks to decide if they're actually going to let China procure stuff from these Chinese companies in terms of memory chips. Also, you had that whole HBF stuff that came out yesterday. I don't think that was necessarily the best for the memory names with this idea of, more optimizations in memory, but Apple potentially getting chips from Chinese companies just creates more supply in the market. Also, you had a Korean newspaper yesterday put out this article saying, according to local Korean media reports, the U.S. government has asked the South Korean government to build memory fabs in the U.S. and ensure a stable supply of memory chips. Now, again, cool, but once again, if the supply starts catching up to the demand, which the whole thesis on the memory chips is that or the memory trade is that AI demand is so aggressive that even if you build tons of new supply, it's not going to catch up. It potentially decreases pricing power and obviously changes the dynamic of supply and demand within this memory trade. So if this is correct and the US government actually is trying to get more memory fabs in the US so that maybe Apple stops, trying to get memory from China, which also is beneficial for Trump because, yeah, maybe Micron's gross margins go down, but at least inflation comes down because Apple wouldn't have to raise their prices like crazy because of this memory stuff. then that would be a good thing for the broader market. Maybe not the best for the memory trade, but again, I think these stocks still trade at relatively cheap multiples regardless of those headwinds. Micron, right, they're up 2%. And I think in the next coming weeks, we're going to find out what happens with the China memory stuff as well. So that's what we got there. That is what we have there on the memory trade. It's grease. It is not grease. It is not gel. And genuinely, it's just hair. NVIDIA. So let's talk about NVIDIA. We got earnings tomorrow. Put in the chat, pump or dump. What do we think? Are we bullish or bearish? I actually like that it's selling off going into the print, to be honest. I think that gives you a good macro setup, especially if oil comes down even further tomorrow. Maybe we hit like $79, $78. I think that would be really bullish for the broader market as NVIDIA reports. By the way, Alibaba CEO bought another 720,000 shares today. So another 10.4 million. The Baba insiders are loading up as the stock has taken a big hit from the CapEx concern. Stock down another 0.5% right here in the pre-market. 70% of you yesterday on the poll said that you are bullish. I mean, I'm bullish as well. I think there's a better chance for a pump than not, given this thing is, it was spent all of last week at 225. Now it's at 211, fell to 208 yesterday. Like, it just feels artificial. And it feels like there's a better chance that it comes higher. But we are going to have to see. Meta right there, that's up 1%. Apple, that's up 0.5%. SanDisk, that's up 3%. And then Micron, that's up 2%. The other big thing for NVIDIA, so first of all, let's just talk about the actual NVIDIA earnings that the market is looking for in terms of the numbers. By the way, before we do that real quick, Trump continues to troll Canada. Quote, 2 hours ago, the United States is giving serious consideration to changing the name of Lake Ontario to Lake America, and that we don't expect to do much business with Ontario any longer. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I mean, again, like, when you talk about trolls, I think he's one of the bigger ones, but it further goes back and forth with what Canada and the U.S. have been doing when it comes to fighting each other. Now, Canada's trade minister came out this morning and said, we are focused on having a constructive relationship with the United States. We would want to have the best situation with all U.S. trade partners, and the government's intention is to announce retaliatory tariffs today. So I think we're going to have further retaliatory tariffs coming from Canada, and I think the U.S. will probably fight that back and forth as well. But eventually, I think they will come to a deal because, again, I don't think this makes any sense, and there's just too much. There's too much trade we do with these guys. There's too much trade, and it's going to be very unlikely for me to see that this actually goes the wrong way. Now, in terms of NVIDIA, what are we looking for? So revenue, $92 billion. This is what Jensen basically got it for. Adjusted EPS, $2.09. Q3 revenue estimate, $104 billion. The options implied move is actually lower than expected, 5.4%. Usually it's around 8%. So we might not actually get a ton of volatility going into the earnings after the print. Maybe that's the way we do get a lot of volatility because usually there's been so many implied moves and we don't get a big move, or we get a dump tomorrow, or we get a dump the day after. Maybe this time, because there's less of an implied vol, if there's really good numbers, it's not baked in, and then people actually get excited and they buy it up, and maybe you actually get a pump versus not. I'm just trying to think of all the different ways that NVIDIA actually gets a move on earnings, given we know the number is going to be great. But the broader question is going to be, can they execute against these numbers? And based on what Raymond James thinks, they upgraded the price target to 352 from 330. They've said NVIDIA has increased its visibility in CPUs, even if they are not a new part of the story. By the way, NVIDIA announced with SpaceX, we talked about it yesterday, that SpaceX will be using the Vera CPU exclusively for their products as well. So you have more demand coming from SpaceX in Q4 of 2027. That product will launch. However, CPUs represent a low single-digit percent of NVIDIA sales, roughly 3% today. In the past, NVIDIA CPUs were tightly tied to its GPUs, but that should change, particularly with agentic use cases. That's why ARM, Intel, AMD have been getting so much momentum when it comes to the CPU market. While NVIDIA's CPU revenue is becoming material within the CPU market, we expect to reach approximately 5% of total revenue by calendar year 2028 in our model. Still a single-digit portion, yet the growth is the fastest among the elements that we model. I think NVIDIA is going to guide really well for CPU growth. I think their overall trajectory of growth is going to be strong. I think they're going to hit that triple-digit growth. If not triple digits, probably 95, 98%. And if they get there, I think the market is going to be excited about that. So I think, and the stock is, if the stock is flat and we get triple-digit growth, the multiple is going to compress probably another 2 or 3 points. I mean, once again, I think you'll have some buyers at some point. It's just we have to get through a lot of these macro concerns that are still in the picture. Also, you have Warsh speaking on Friday. So even if NVIDIA does get a good move, it's like, well, Warsh affects the entire market. So will that be suppressed before we see what we get from Warsh? So this will be important, and we're going to see how the broader market ultimately reacts to that. Bitcoin still down right here, below 79,000 now, actually taking a pretty big drop, about 3,000 points from where it was last night. Michael Saylor continues the onslaught of AI videos. This is what he posted yesterday.
If you've been investing in gold or real estate, you need to hear this. Gold is heavy. You cannot bring it on a plane. No. You cannot send gold to your friend in South Africa via the internet. Real estate has huge maintenance costs. You need to repair them all the time. And what if a hurricane blows your house away, or a flood, or both? But if you have Bitcoin, you can send it anywhere with your phone in a second. And there is no hurricane that can blow your Bitcoin away. Buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin is better. Send this to your friend. If you've been...
I mean, honestly, now that Bitcoin's rallying, like, I think these videos piss off less people. It still probably pisses off a lot of people, but now at least, you're seeing your bag go up. You're happier seeing positive content on Bitcoin. I think now he's got to be pumping out as many of these AI videos as possible. And maybe that helps something with sentiment, because, maybe the videos are interpreted better when Bitcoin's going up. But it really is ironic to me that Bitcoin's down as the 10-year comes down. And if the 10-year further comes down, it's great for stocks. But if it's not great for Bitcoin, then this is going to be one of those moments where the rally might get stalled out here. So I think some more price action over the next coming weeks is going to be super important. But it got through 80 easily last night. It went all the way up to 81.2. So like once it made its run, it made its run pretty aggressively. It just ended up getting rejected early this morning as well. Yeah, they do have $2 billion as they raised a lot more cash yesterday by selling more shares in the public markets. None of you guys are complaining about ads, so that is good. Maybe we fixed the YouTube midstream ad thing. Hopefully that is fixed. Usually by now, early in the stream, a lot more of you guys would have said you saw an ad. So I think that's fixed. I adjusted a couple settings last night. Hopefully that works. But if not, then you can let me know. Mike, and thank you. That is very kind. You did not have to do that. Thank you for the gifted 50 memberships. 50 of you guys just got memberships due to Mike and Sir Lant. You got a membership. Jets, you got a membership. Samuel Taylor, you got a membership. Nick, you got a membership. Steven, Crypto Coffee, Mick, Sam Arsenal, GP Dave, Polytake, Kite, bunch of you guys. G Alaska, Leon Wood. YouTube just picks people randomly to give a membership to. I don't know how their algo decides who to give a membership to. It's very random. I think it's like if you comment in the chat a lot, you get a membership. I don't really know how it happens. There's nothing you get for being a member of the channel. It's just $5 a month to support the channel, but there's not like any exclusive videos or anything. But appreciate that, Mike. It means a lot. So yeah, you get a car. You get a car. Thank you for that. It means like you've given memberships like every single week. So I appreciate you, man. Thank you for the memberships. And thank you for spreading some of the blessings around for everyone to get it. S&P 500 right there. We are green in the pre-market. Again, S&P has been on a losing streak. NVIDIA also, if NVIDIA goes red today, it's going to be their longest losing streak since 2019. It's already the longest losing streak 7 days in a row since 2022. So if we actually do get some more red, then it would be the longest losing streak in a while. By the way, I've been looking more into Cerebras. I found this out last night. I can't buy it, dude. I cannot buy it. Look at their lockup schedule. For the next 7 weeks, 21% of their shares get unlocked. I just can't do it, even if I'm kind of interested in the name. First of all, I already hate the valuation. Then I'm like, oh, 8% of shares outstanding get unloaded in the public markets that people are obviously going to want to take some profits on because they've been holding on to this thing for a decade. Like, it's tough, man, with these IPOs. And I'm going to be very curious about Anthropic's IPO schedule as well, about like how Anthropic is dumping these shares into the public markets and if they're happening all at once or it's kind of like SpaceX. But I just do not want to be liquidity for someone who bought this company 10 years ago when no one knew what inference was. Now everyone knows what it is. So it's important, but it's like the alpha is not there like it was 10 years ago. And that person from 10 years ago needs someone to buy their bags. And unless you think Cerebras is going to massively outperform, which I think it can, but the valuation already makes it feel hard to buy. Same thing with SpaceX and Anthropic, like all these names, multi-trillion-dollar valuation. Cerebras is at 44 billion, but still trades at 115 times sales. It's a little hard to be excited to buy those names. 190 right there in the pre-market that's up 2.9%. as well. SpaceX, which was down a little bit yesterday, that is up 1.6%. Rocket Lab took an ugly. I was thinking of selling puts on Rocket Lab because it is bounced on 57, basically below 60 every time this year when it's gotten there. It was at 68 yesterday. If this thing actually gets closer to the low 60s, I think I'll be selling puts because I just don't think it would stay there in the midst of the progress they've made and with SpaceX kind of normalizing around this 120, 130 range. But it's up a little bit in the pre-market with all the other high beta stocks. 69.91 was at 70. Hopefully can get back above 70. Bloom also got a nice little bounce from the lows of yesterday. Gavin Baker loves it. Yeah, but Gavin Baker has also had Cerebus for a long time. Same with SpaceX, right? He's owned those names for a decade now, which just makes it a little tough to be fully excited, because they have a heavy margin of safety on these stocks. Okay, let's talk about Dick's. So stock is down 20.6% right here. They missed on revenue by 1%. They missed on EPS by 9%. Street wanted 383. They came in at 353. Comparable sales were up 5%. Their guidance was a little bit lower than expected, down 2%. And basically they said the consumer is having some issues. Now, this is not the first company that said the consumer is having some issues. Some companies have said the consumer is having no issues, but there is a little bit more of a broader focus on athletic footwear that is causing some trouble with Dick's. We are all adults here and we are analyzing Dick's, okay? I don't know why you guys are making a big deal out of it. This is a public company and we're analyzing it. Quote, conditions across portions of the athletic footwear and apparel marketplace become increasingly promotional. This environment had a more significant impact on the Foot Locker business, given its greater exposure to legacy footwear business. They acquired Foot Locker, I think it was in 2024 or early 2025, and greater dependence on footwear launch and retro product. Not only were there fewer launches in the second quarter, but those launches performed below both industry and our expectations. While we are taking a more cautious view of the balance of the year, we remain highly confident in the strength of the Dick's business and our long-term opportunity at Foot Locker. So, yeah, people aren't buying shoes anymore. And quite frankly, I get it. Like, who really, put in the chat if you've bought a new pair of sneakers or heels or slippers or something in the past 6 months. Not the past year, the past 6 months. In the past, or 2026. So far in 2026, who's bought a new pair of footwear? Because, like, who's really buying this stuff anymore? Like, once you get a pair of sneakers, you get a pair of sneakers. Like, do you really need 17 pairs of sneakers? Do you need that much footwear? Right? Like, so I kind of like, we already know Nike has been, falling off and their brand sales have been down. And like, I don't know the last time I went to a Foot Locker. If I really need to get something, I'll order it off Amazon. And, again, it's like once, maybe every year, usually every 2 years. Like I think I bought new shoes in September when I moved into this apartment. I got new gym shoes and I still use those every day. Like I haven't, they're Nike shoes. I haven't needed, new gym shoes in a long time. So I think that's part of the reason. Or it's more of the brand of Foot Locker not resonating with the direct-to-consumer and your Hokas of the world getting a lot more attention, your On-Ons of the world. And as a result, it's either a branding problem or it's a consumer problem. But nonetheless, Dick's right there down 20% as that's continued to get hit. Yeah, a lot of you guys are saying no. Did you buy sneakers from Amazon? Yeah, if you know your sneaker size, it's not that hard. You just order it. Like, I've never been a big person when it comes to shoes. And like I got these dress shoes. Oh, I did get some dress shoes. This was during Black Friday from like Payless at an outlet mall. There were like 2 pairs for like $70. One was black, one was brown, and they fit great. And like I wear them all the time. Like, so I just think if that's kind of the core category that created pain for this company, then obviously, that has to tell more on the consumer than the actual analysis of footwear itself. And maybe that's a broader issue. NVIDIA right there, 211. As that continues to get a little bit more love. Empty guesses, I get mine at Costco. I mean, yeah, a lot. Like, they're sneakers at the end of the day. They're shoes. Are they that big of a deal? So, I don't know. Some of the stuff you're just seeing more and more emphasis on parts of the business that aren't performing that well. And because the market is uptight about like, hey, like, is the consumer healthy or not? And we don't fully know. And then speaking of the consumer, then you get a headline like this from the Wall Street Journal last night that continues to show that we are absolutely in a K-shaped economy. 1 in 9 Americans apparently are millionaires. The US added 1,200 new millionaires a day last year. There are now 23.6 millionaires. There's about 350 million people in the United States. In China, there's about 5.3 million. Japan, 2.9. South Korea, 1.3. Germany, 2.6. UK, 2.4. France 2.4. I mean, this was kind of astonishing. I think this has to be because of the stock market going up and people's 401ks and accounts appreciating in value. But you have that part of the economy, and then you have the other part of the economy where people aren't buying new sneakers, potentially because, you know, they're stretched, and it's a whole different segment of the consumer, which is, you know, creating the bifurcation that we've been seeing in a while. You guys think it's housing? I mean, yeah, it could be housing as well. We need to, what's the aggregate? Let me see if Gemini can give me an answer. How much have houses appreciated since, let's do 2023. That's when like the bull market really started for stocks. So houses were up, house prices as per macro trends were up 5% in 23, 5.5 in 24, and 3.4 in 2025. They're on pace to do another 5% in 2026. Stock market has basically tripled the gains per year. Stock market's been doing 20, 17, and 24. So in some years quadrupled the housing market. But nonetheless, houses are up. Now, since 2020, houses are up a lot more because of COVID and money printing and all that stuff. But since 2023, if you bought the S&P versus if you bought a house, obviously you've done a lot better in the S&P. But nonetheless, assets going up, it once again becomes an ownership economy. Either you own assets or not. If you do, that's helping. If not, then, you know, it's not helping as much. But it once again goes to this argument about bond yields and who is actually suffering with yields going higher. And it is the bifurcated nature of this economy and what it also affects. I also saw this stat that I thought was interesting. You know how people aren't drinking anymore? Well, they're definitely smoking a ton of weed. Marijuana smoking hits a record high in the US. It's reached 17%, more than double the 7% reported in 2023. Cigarette smoking remains at a record low of 11%. 9% of adults vape and 4% use nicotine pouches. And marijuana is highest among younger adults, with about 25% of 30 to 49-year-olds using marijuana. Americans view it positively, 47% see it as something that's good, while 46% see it as something that's negative. I think this is important because, look, if the U.S. can actually build a real industry out of weed, which it was illegal for so long, and now it's slowly getting legalized in every state and decriminalized, you know, it's another business opportunity. Obviously, the weed stocks had their run in 2020 and have kind of faded since then. But if more people are smoking versus drinking, you know, there might be some more opportunities around marijuana as a business perspective versus alcohol itself. All of that is California. Wasn't it Massachusetts that, which, yes, I still can't say the stupid state name, but it wasn't that the first state to, well, no, that was the second state after California to legalize it, I think. It was California, Massachusetts, and then I think New Jersey was up there a couple years ago that legalized, and then New York. But those were like the first couple states that actually legalized it. Well, thank you for the super chat, Amit. I can smell that pumpkin candle from here. Wealth is talking about the pumpkin cupcake candle that I showed on the market close yesterday that I bought along with these new AirPods when I was at the store yesterday because they were at the counter. I don't have it with me because it's in my living room, but I'm happy you can smell the pumpkin cupcake. Dude, it's fall. It's the greatest part of the year, September through December. I mean, we're not at September yet, but we're basically there. It's time to bust out the pumpkins and have things smell the right way. So I'm excited. But also, this year has gone by quick, man. This year has felt so long with all the volatility, but it's also gone by so freaking quick. Like the fact that we're about to enter 2027 is kind of crazy. But it is happening. We got a report right here from Al Jazeera. Iran has reportedly communicated its negotiating conditions, including terms concerning the Strait of Hormuz. Quite frankly, for those that are just joining, the headline that we got this morning is the U.S. reportedly offered Iran a deal. I know we've heard this headline a billion times, but a deal to halt the siege and lift sanctions in exchange for reopening the strait. If Iran, which I'm getting the headline just now 3 minutes ago, is reportedly negotiating different conditions and communicating that to the Pakistanis, which will then communicate that to the United States. Yeah, Iran informed the United States of its position on the Strait of Hormuz through Pakistani intermediaries. Maybe we'll get oil. Wow, Marvell just got a big candle. Maybe we'll get oil to come down. Maybe we'll get stocks to go a bit more green. And maybe we can kind of get out of this funk. NVIDIA right there, that's up. Marvell, that is at 237 as well. If you stop, we'll stop. Yeah, exactly. I know this headline is so old and so boring, and I've said it a billion times on the show, thinking that it would be different every time. But all those times the bond market wasn't screaming. This time, I think Trump and Bessent know. Like if the $1 trillion of buybacks to create liquidity in bond yields couldn't do anything, to get yields to come down. If Druckenmiller writing an op-ed, Druckenmiller, Bessent's mentor, basically saying this is nonsense, can't do anything, then they're going to have to end the war. Like if those two things can't solve the situation, we're going to need the war to come to an end and get the oil to start coming down, which is what we're seeing in the pre-market. And that's why I think stocks are great. Joanne says, I love the fall in New England. I think fall weather. Even today, I was walking this morning, dude. It's starting to get colder. Like you don't need like a hoodie or anything outside yet, but like it's not the same type of heat that you usually get at 7 a.m. in the morning in Jersey like you did in July. You're starting to get a little bit of that wind, which is like the perfect weather to walk in, but it's not as hot anymore. Bloom right there. That's up 2.4%, 215. Bitcoin continues to fall, 78,687. This is what Bessent said yesterday around Iran and this new economic D-Day agenda that he's trying to impose on the Iranians.
And let me be clear, any entity that facilitates money laundering on behalf of Iran will be removed from the US dollar system. The clock just started ticking. The new sectoral sanctions determinations issued today target 5 of Iran's most vital lifelines that it exploits in other countries: digital assets, technology, gold, aviation, and shipping. These measures broaden secondary sanctions risk for anyone foolish enough to continue conducting business with this regime, and will accelerate the speed with which we pursue them. As I speak, Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control is also sanctioning over 60 entities, individuals, and vessels around the world that enable the Iranian regime to procure illicit nuclear and missile technology, conduct cyber operations, and generate oil revenue. This is a sustained campaign to collapse every last option for Iran.
And I think a lot of this yesterday was kind of just for show. Like if they're actually negotiating, this is just the United States like putting this out there. Hey, we're going to create economic pressure. But if the terms of the deal that are being reported are accurate today, which is the U.S. is offering to get rid of those sanctions in exchange for opening the Strait of Hormuz, then, a lot of this is just to say that we're going to do this. But in reality, they want to get rid of the sanctions and get Iran to the table. And quite frankly, it would be the most Trump thing ever, as we have 1 minute until the market opens, if they get a deal right before the midterms. If midterms are in November, if they get a deal by like mid-September, October, probably not going to happen in the next couple of weeks. Right before the midterms, that would be something where Trump tries to claim victory for it going into the midterm season. And so if that happens, maybe that's another tailwind for markets, but ultimately over the next coming weeks, we're going to see if that actually plays out. All right, we've got 15 seconds. Thank you all for being here on this Tuesday morning. Because you are all here and you all showed up, which I am deeply, deeply grateful for, you should refute the mute because the stock market is now open. All right, wake your asses up. Let's get into it. S&P 500 opens up 766 on the day, up about 0.35%. If we can get to 770, that would be incredible. Maybe we don't get there before NVIDIA earnings, but that would be, I think, kind of the key level that we're looking for here. Micron opens up 2%, 932. That's green. SanDisk, which was down 10% yesterday, 1536. That's up 2.9%. That is green. Apple, that is also green. Meta, 565. That's green. Meta, can we get to 570? Nebius, which got upgraded today by Goldman Sachs, that's up 3.7%. United Airlines, that's up 2.9%. The airlines are up as oil is down. Quite frankly, I think there's a trade to be made in the airlines. If you think oil is going to go back to like 65, which is where it was on July 1st, like American Airlines was $18 when that happened. American Airlines right here at 14. I mean, I think there's a world if which oil collapses, the cruise lines, airlines, it's a simple trade. If you can bet oil comes down, that those names go up. Intel, that's up 2.9%. I did buy another 100 shares of Intel yesterday, so added to the position at around 87.50. Intel right there up 2.8%. Bloom, that's up 5%, went all the way to 185 yesterday. Broadcom 360, that's green. Accelera, the I think director of Accelera bought another $700,000 worth of shares yesterday, another $53,000, or it was like $550,000 worth of shares. So Accelera getting some insider buying. Google, that's up 0.5%. Tesla, 350. That is green. Palantir, we are green. 178. Marvell looked like it was going to break out based on some of the pre-market action. Almost 240 right here. This was at 250 last week with the Google news of them getting ready to buy 7% of the company, or having warrants to buy 7% of the company. Nancy Pelosi did buy Bloom and Intel yesterday. She also has been long Uber. Uber has been kind of stuck in this 77 to 80 range, down a little bit right here as some of these growth stocks are going up. Is Apple still green? Apple goes green, 312.51. That's up. VST, this has been seeing a lot more insider buying as well. I still have not really looked into this. It's something that I have to take some time and just get a better understanding of. Hopefully tonight I'll be able to just kind of look at their balance sheet and kind of understand more about what the company does. But you are seeing insider buying. You are seeing Peter Thiel buying. You are seeing Gavin Baker buying, and effectively, stocks down 17% this year. So as an energy bottleneck, that one might be getting a lot more attention, along with a variety of other energy bottlenecks that are out there. I think that's part of the reason why Bloom is doing so well. Dix is down 20%. That one continues to go red as it is seeing some pain on their consumer discretionary footwear purchases not being well. Marvell, 241.60. That's up 5%. NVIDIA, 210. That's up a little bit. SpaceX, which got upgraded to 240 by JP Morgan. I have not used Grok Bot yet, but enough people are talking about it to the point where I think I'm probably going to sign up soon and see if I can automate a part of my workflow with the bot, given how much people are excited about on it. But JP Morgan was basically saying we are increasingly positive on Grok. Also, there was a report yesterday that Elon had an all-hands meeting with the Cursor team and basically said Grok is falling behind and I'm not used to losing. And he's basically saying figure it out and make Grok the leading frontier LLM. And so obviously Elon's really excited and he wants Grok to be able to win and compete with Anthropic and OpenAI and all those other guys. 136.94 on SpaceX. That's up 1.94%. Palantir, 177. Bloom continuing to get some love right there. 4.5%. Let's see if we can get up to 215. Let's see if we can break through that. It was almost at 220 in the pre-market. Trump just tweeted, based on my very good relationship with Kim Jong-un of North Korea, I was not happy with the fact that the United States had long ago agreed to participate in joint military exercises with South Korea. The exercises are not only costly, with much of the cost paid for by the United States, but send a signal that it is totally inappropriate and hostile. Therefore, and based on the fact, he tweeted this already. Same tweet. It's the same thing. I've instructed Pete Hegseth to substantially reduce the joint military exercises. I recently asked the president of South Korea if they would like to join us in the denuclearization of Iran. They said no. Yeah, this was a tweet that came out last week. I don't know why he tweeted it again, but we covered this last week. Yeah, that looks like a mistake, but that tweet is not necessarily new. Uber, 79.30. Wow, Marvell. There's no news on this thing, but look at her go. 6.5% as that continues to go green. Yeah, it's an old tweet. It's not a retweet either. Like it's a new tweet on his side. It's just the same content from last week. Marvell, 244. Was there a headline I missed on that? But I don't think I did. It's just a very nice run up. It looks like a lot of buying here. Maybe the street's thinking there's going to be some announcement. United Airlines, that's up 2%. AAOI, that's up 4%. AppLovin, are we getting back above 300? 305, that's up 2% at least. That's getting some love. Iran, we've got earnings this week. Let's see if this can make a move. That's up 3%, fell below 40 last night. Oh, it does have earnings this week. You're right. That's on Thursday. Oh, dude, that's right after NVIDIA. On NVIDIA, by the way, we also have CrowdStrike, Salesforce, Okta, Synopsys, and HP. So we actually have a lot of companies with NVIDIA reporting that are going to be important. And then on Thursday, we have Affirm, Workday, Ulta, Rubrik, Marvell, Iren, and Gap. So you do have a decent chunk of reporting after NVIDIA earnings. Palantir 176, NVIDIA 211, at least NVIDIA trying to get the breakout to 212. Marvell keeps going, 243. Hoodie 107 as that is coming back. BTC, nice green candle is 79. Let's see maybe if 80 is in play. going into today, again, it was at 81,000 last night. Why is Navitas up 10%? I do not know. That's interesting. It was up 7.5. Again, a lot of the high beta names are getting some love as oil comes down and the 10-year relaxes a little bit. Rocket Lab ended up just going red. So I would imagine, wow, Rocket Lab actually losing a decent chunk of the move here. 69 all the way down to 68.20. But yeah, if we see a high beta rally in general today, from oil being down, I don't think it would be that crazy. Zeta's down 2. Some of your software names selling off. Ondas down 0.5%. Elf, that's down 1. Estee Ladar, that's basically flat. Rosenblatt upgraded Marvell to 300 today. You know, this thing got to 330 just off a Jensen comment. I wonder if they actually start putting up some meaningful growth. That might be a better shot for it to go higher. Navitas signed an acquisition to acquire Claros for AI power. Okay. So that's your headline right there on Navitas, as it's losing a good chunk of those gains, but still up 5%, 1340 to 1288 as it's going down. Oracle, I don't even think we looked at Oracle yesterday. 145. This went kind of stuck there. Burry, again, is short Oracle, CoreWeave, and Nebius, along with Micron. Oracle, I think he shorted around this level, so this has kind of been stuck here. Rocket Lab just falling off a cliff, 67.77 as that goes red. ASTS, which had a nasty day yesterday, that's also red again, 62 as that continues to go down. Nike's getting a move. No, Nike's going down with Dick's. Netflix, are we getting a move? Netflix actually getting above 80. Airbnb is probably up. Airbnb is hitting, I think, is this an all-time high? Airbnb is, yeah, basically an all-time high. Well, no. In February 2021, it was $212. It took 5 years to even kind of get close to 200 again. But definitely a 52-week high on Airbnb. Airbnb, Netflix, some of your consumer staples getting some love. Bloom, again, 215. Apple, 310. That's falling off a little bit from 312. And then Palantir, we did see 180 last week. Marvell's still holding 244. We got up to 246. AMD, that's up 4%, but Palantir was not able to hold above 180 this week yet. AMD 472 is what you're seeing. Celsius also, I know this one's been annoying this year, but ever since that Rockstar founder came in and bought a bunch of stock, you started to see this one get a lot more love. Is Schwab down again for people? A couple of you guys saying Schwab might be down. SMCI, that's up 6%. Again, a lot of these names, this is kind of my point about Anthropic when they go public. It's going to be in a bucket with all these other companies. So like SMCI was down 7% yesterday. Why? I mean, because the whole bucket was down. It's up 7%. Wow, Moderna getting a nice little move right here, up 7%. But now it's up 7% because high beta stocks are up. Like, I feel like that's how Anthropic's going to trade. And it's going to be one of those things where you have to ride it up or down in the context of where the momentum is actually going. Bitmine, that's up 2% as well. Moderna, there's a lot of option flow coming in on Moderna. That's like $180, $200, $170. And it's like sizable amount. It's almost like people think that phase 3 trial wasn't, the only kind of catalyst for them. But it's been about a week and the stock's been holding the basically 120% move that it's been able to make. SanDisk is losing a lot of its love. 1564 to 1570. What are thoughts on NVIDIA? Again, we talked about it early in the show. I think NVIDIA will crush. I actually really like that it's dumped going into earnings. I know it's up today, but anything below 220 into earnings, I think, is a good setup, I think. But, every NVIDIA report has been a dump afterwards. So this time it's going to have to go a bit different. Reddit, are we up? Reddit also, this has been hit over the past couple of days, 156, even after they got into the S&P 500. Moderna, 148, Reddit right there. That's up 2.1%. How about Oscar and the healthcare names? Oscar, 3183. They had a great earnings 2 weeks ago, and that stock is up from those earnings. By the way, the chairman of the board of Oscar, which I believe is Josh Kushner, is now a multi-billionaire with Thrive Capital, UNH right there flat, and his Lakers stake that he now has. They have 5 stocks that are public in the portfolio for Thrive, and those stocks are Shopify, Amazon, And I need to find the other three if I can pull it up right here. But Shopify and Amazon. Shopify is the new one they bought. Amazon they've had for a while. And they have 3 more. But the rest of it is in privates. A lot of it's in real estate. And yeah, he's now worth nearly $20 billion. Okay, it is Shopify, Amazon, SpaceX, Oscar, Figma, Shopify, Amazon, SpaceX, and Oscar is what Thrive Capital has. AMD, that's up 3. You're seeing the semis not lose. Moderna getting the breakout, 150 right here. Let's see if that one can actually keep going. 150.5. NVIDIA, 212. Okay, NVIDIA getting some love. Amazon, we are at 262. That's green. Google, which, by the way, launched Gemini for financial services today. So they're working with a bunch of different financial enterprises to get this product out there. 349 on Google. And then SpaceX, 137 as that goes up. Trump, new tweet. Canada has been ripping off the USA for decades. They've been charging our farmers 400% tariffs and more. They have driven many wonderful US companies out of business. For 10 years, they wouldn't certify Gulfstream jets until I got involved. They wanted 100% of the market for Gulfstream's Canadian competitor. I deal with many countries, and Canada's easily the most difficult and unreasonable. They feel entitled, but they are not a state and will be entitled no longer. Okay. So, once again, Trump making his argument about why he is not a fan of Canada. Moderna, up 9% right there. Again, I think this back and forth is all a show. We need Canada. They need us. They're a big trading partner. It doesn't make any sense to me that it's not actually going to meaningfully result in something serious of a deal. It's just going to take a little bit of time, but I think eventually we will get that deal, and that deal will be productive. It's just a question of when. Wow, Moderna up 10% right here. Let's see if it actually breaks 153, 152.15. It is trying. Amazon 262, Google again 348. Getting a 9% move on that. But again, I think they're going to be going back and forth a lot publicly if they want to, continue to figure out what the deal looks like. Reddit, that's up to NVIDIA 212, high of day on NVIDIA. Netflix 81.19. Let's see if that can also continue. Amazon 262, whereas Tesla, which had a nice little run a couple of days ago to 365, now back to 352, as that is trying to get the bid. Uber 79.79, Palantir 179, Palantir going for 180, American Airlines 1380, that's up. Cerebras is down. SPY, also nice little move. Rocket Lab, what is going on here? What is going on? Down 2%. It's like the street. I mean, I understand Rocket Lab is a high multiple, but this thing is down from 150. Like, it's not like it hasn't taken a beating already. And the street's just continuing to let it kind of get beat up right here. I don't know. It's interesting. NVIDIA 1253. SanDisk, is that still down? SanDisk is very close to going red, which would be a little ugly. Moderna trying to hold on. It got to 152.83. It's only 2%. Yeah, but, Rocket Lab losing the 80s is one thing. Then it loses the 70s. Now it's like, are we going to lose the 60s? Or are we going to normalize in the mid-60s? It's lost pretty much all gains year to date. And, it's down from the 150s. Now, maybe it should have never got to the 150s, but still, that's a pretty ugly decline from there. And I'm not exactly sure why, but it might just be valuation. The street's getting maybe fed up with how aggressive some of the valuations are. But then you look at valuations of some of these other companies, and it's like, okay, well, the street has a tolerance for some of the stuff. Hood right there, 106. As that's green. Palantir, there you go, 180. Well, very close to 180. Very, very, very close right here to that again, as we were there yesterday. Yes, we talked about Apple dropping the new Mac Minis. I don't think that's going to do much for the stock. I mean, what's really going to do something for the stock is, again, Siri becoming more effective, the AI story, being played out in a more meaningful way, and more importantly, the perception of the foldable phone, because that's got to be something the street thinks is going to create a bigger catalyst for growth. But the Mac Minis aren't bad. We know that demand has been surging given the level of agentic inference and excitement there has been for agents. SMCI up 7%. So you're getting some love right there on SMCI as that's getting a bigger move. Celsius, that's at 35. Netflix, that's at 81.42. Uber, 79.91. Let's see if that can gap up with the other consumer discretionaries like Airbnb. Cerebras trying to go green. And Palantir, very close. Very, very close. NVIDIA, wow, 213. Dude, NVIDIA fell to almost 207 yesterday. Like, it just felt so weird how this thing was falling off a cliff. It's nice to see this starting to come back. Let's see if it either tops out here or if it can actually make a run to 215, 216. The Qs are going up. That is also bullish. I'm seeing every sector pretty much go green on the heat map. You're not really seeing the heat map go the opposite direction. Yeah, pretty much everything. Well, consumer defensive's down a little bit with your Walmarts, your Coca-Colas, and that makes sense because if growth is back. Those names are red. Verizon as well. But they are still somewhat green. ServiceNow, 129. As that continues to go green as well. Google, 349. SpaceX, 137. The Rocket Lab also going the opposite of SpaceX is a little confusing, but you're seeing that. CRML, this is the rare earth company, right? Wow, 15%. Okay, we haven't seen CRML get this type of love in a while. What's the headline there? The rare earth trade in general, Accelera is up 11%. Those insider buys, I think, are being seen positively. I don't see a major CRML headline. Well, maybe this. U.S. from Bloomberg expanding their search for critical mineral projects for defense gear. What about the other ones? MP, is that up? Not as much as CRML. USAR, that's another one. That's up 1%. It looks like critical metals in particular. This one got to like 20 at one point this year, right? This was at, if I'm not wrong, 32 back in October of 2025. Yeah, it got to 20 in January. That's when all the small caps were running and the trade around the rare earths was doing really well. I guess that Bloomberg headline is highlighting this one as an important winner. Wow, NVIDIA taking up the entire market. 214. What do we guys think? Do we top at 214 or do we keep going on NVIDIA? What do we think? What do we think? Because if NVIDIA tops out around this range, usually after 3-4%, it tends to, chill out. Then I feel like, I don't know. I feel like the rest of the market might also take a little bit of a break as well. CRML is still up 15%. SanDisk up 2.9. I feel like NVIDIA is setting up like a trap. Bitcoin, are we red? Oh, Bitcoin. It's just at 79. AMD, that's also up. Let me check NVIDIA's resistance. What are we looking for? We're looking for, as Moderna, 153.65. We're looking for 215 and then 220. So 215 has 57,000 shares. That's not much. 220 has 176,000 shares. It's a pretty big reversal from yesterday, but we got to see if it can continue. SanDisk, 1533, as that continues to be up, but not up as much. Hollis says, I just sold the NVIDIA shares I bought yesterday, so usually that means it's going higher. Well, Hollis, if you bought them at like 208 or 210, you definitely got a nice little profit on those shares as well. Volume on NVIDIA is 18 million. Volume on SPY is 2 million. Wow, 2 million shares. That's not a lot of volume on SPY. But you at least still have some green today. Joe said I sold NVIDIA for BABA. Dude, the insiders, I have not seen this type of insider buying on BABA in a very long time. I mean, that's pretty aggressive. But 118 right there on BABA, as that one is still down from the amount of CapEx that they're continuing to spend. CoreWeave as well, getting some love back into the $90 range almost. That's up 4%. And the Besis, 218.50. What do you just look at for resistance? So on Robinhood, you just go to the order book flow. You press the candle, or not the candle, the arrow near the price, and it opens up level 2 data. You have to be a gold member to access it, but there's plenty of platforms that show it for free. But that's what I use on Hood to see where there's bigger chunks of shares waiting to be sold at. USAR, that's up 1%. The CRML headline's really interesting because this stock is still down a lot from its highs. So if this is like a real headline around rare earths, and it's not just like something that momentum traders are using to pump up. The rare earth story, I feel like we don't talk about just as much as the energy story. We don't talk about them. I mean, those two things are like really freaking important. It's just those trades got really hyped in January, and then they've taken a pretty big beating. NVIDIA, she keeps going, 214.60. She continues to make her move. Let's see if 215 has a shot. Palantir, did we touch 180? I don't think we did. Dell's up 5%. Interesting. Dell Dell topped at 490, then came all the way down to 380. And now she's right back to 456. I mean, July was pretty tough for this company, but even in July, after the drawdown of 30%, it was still up 2x for the year. Why is Zeta dumping? Good question. It might be all of software. Is it IGV? Yeah, software as ServiceNow is down. Salesforce is down. Palantir is up. Yeah, it might be a software thing more than anything. I just don't want to see this go below 25. I mean, selfishly, I do, because it would be good to buy more shares around that range. But holding the 27s, 28s to me is really important because it sets up for the leg going into 30s. But if we lose the momentum and it falls like 23, 24, like that would be really annoying. So as long as it stays above that, even if it's not going higher, that's okay to me. Moderna, 151, down from 154.26. Reddit, 155. Do you have any update about the Meta trial? So the opening statements were last week. I believe they will be going back into the courtroom this week. The other update on Meta outside of the trial is that they have a consumer AI agent called Hatch. NVIDIA's got to be careful here. She looks like she wants to top out at 214. Let's see if that one can keep going. Which is their version of the OpenClaw AI agent. It's basically their version of Grok Bot. And so I think Meta is going to try to put that out, and they have billions of users to be able to see what an appetite looks like for a consumer AI agent. I just don't know how Meta would distribute it. Like, would your agent live in Instagram? Would it live in Facebook? I mean, I imagine it would, right? Like, where would your agent live? What is it? A new app that's connected to your Instagram and Facebook? And like I don't know. Like, I wonder how Zucks would kind of get people to use this thing every day. For Apple, it's so obvious. For Google, it's so obvious because they own the device. But Zucks has to go through their devices to get access to them, right? And so I do wonder. I think the business agent stuff makes a lot of sense in selling that in conjunction with advertising, but what does it look like from a consumer perspective? Well, WhatsApp, that's actually a good point. I didn't think of WhatsApp. Because WhatsApp, NVIDIA, don't do this to us. Don't do this. Don't go to 213. WhatsApp is where everyone goes to send messages every day, right? Like that kind of is like a lifeline for so many people. Even if you're not doing business on WhatsApp, like if you're, connecting with friends and family. How many messages are sent per day on WhatsApp? Let's see if we can get that stat. Per day, 150 billion messages are sent on WhatsApp. Yeah, that's probably the easiest place where they could put that type of an agent. Evercore also upgraded Meta to 860 on their price target. And they continue to be bullish on them. 150 billion. That's wild. 213.70 on NVIDIA. All right, if it actually topped at 214.73, then that'll be annoying, but the rest of the market might follow that. Like NVIDIA does that, dude. If you've stared at NVIDIA's chart enough, like if you miss this rally and try to get in at 213 or 214 and be like, all right, it's going higher, like it will stop you out so quickly after a couple bucks. It's usually $4 to $5 that it moves. And then if you try to get those extra $3 or $4, it's got to be a really good day because every dollar is $24 billion in market cap being added to the company. And so after a $4 or $5 move, which is about 2-3%, it tends to not really give you that much more. But it also kind of takes the market with it. Apple 311, SanDisk also falling with NVIDIA right there. A bit further down. I think Netflix is getting some Ackman love. I mean, you got a big investor putting $1 billion into this company. Micron at $925 down from $930. Marvell still holding $245. So I think that also, we talked about the headline on Netflix yesterday, right? The attempt for them to become a distributor of other streaming services versus just becoming a service that offers content. I think that's bullish for them. It is a sign of defeat that they don't have enough content, but you know, even if they're admitting defeat, they can still smell new money because they have new services to offer. Get it? Defeat, smell, because feet are smelly. Anyway, 81.31 on Netflix. That's up 1.62%. Palantir, 178, 1.25% as that continues to go green as well. Nabesis, 217, as that is also that is also green, 3.27%. Guys, by the way, tomorrow we are having a reporter from the Wall Street Journal sit in the back of this room and watch the market open because she's doing an article on retail content creators, stock market people. So she's going to be in the back of the room. Her name's going to be Hannah, and she's just going to be watching how we do the show. So tomorrow, when I make a joke, I need to see laughing emojis. I need to see LOLs. I need to see, I need to see some firepower, okay? She's going to be watching. She's going to be looking at the chat. She's going to be seeing how I do what I do. So when I have a good moment, when I have some fire analysis, when I break down a topic, when I make a joke, I need to see the chat cooperate because we're getting into the Wall Street Journal, okay? You guys are going to be there with me. I'm going to make sure the picture of the iPad with the chat is in the picture in the journal piece. So when I make a joke off the dome, like I just did with defeat, which quite frankly, I think I should get a lot more credit for. Not a lot of people can do that. I need you guys to reciprocate, okay? We are getting into the journal. So do not spam the freaking rainbow emojis while she's watching in the background, okay? Like, it's supposed to be a stock market stream. I don't need her asking me, why is your audience spamming rainbow emojis? Like, I don't need to have to explain what's going on here. She needs to be saying, oh, wow, yeah, amazing analysis. Yeah, that does make sense. I do think bond yields are reacting. Like, that's what I need to see tomorrow, all right? So just giving you guys a little bit of a warning. Per right there, Hyperliquid Strategies, that's up 2.7%. Applied Digital, that is up 4.7%. Also going up with the neoclouds right here. In the past 24 hours, 90,000 crypto traders were liquidated on the short side, 625 million. The largest single liquidation order happened on Bitcoin, valued at $103 million. So you're seeing a decent chunk of these liquidations starting to come in from the short side, which is a good thing. Are you going to sing Bohemian Rhapsody for her? No, I will be singing the tunes of the market so that she's impressed with the community that we've built and with the show and all that stuff, so I'm going to need some cooperation. And so when I make a joke, I just need to make sure you guys have my back. All right. Tomorrow's a big one. Tomorrow is a big one. Meta right there, 565, as that's up 1%. You'll get more points if we spam the rainbow emoji. You guys are ridiculous. Palantir 177, CRML, that's still up 14%. It should be fun though. In all seriousness, it should be cool. It's not going to just be me in the article. She's like doing a comparison between me and other people on Wall Street. So she's going to have like this person and what they do, and then like a commodities trader, and then me. So it's like a multifaceted piece of like the different sides of Wall Street. And so she kind of wanted to see like, what does the morning look like when it comes to breaking news and analyzing and what's going on and all these different screens I have and trying to navigate everything. So it should be fun. Should be cool to kind of see what that looks like in the journal. Okay, what else do we have? SpaceX still slightly flat. CRML got $240,000 worth of calls, $12.50 expiring February 2027. The 2029 options, by the way, are coming in September. So like literally in 2 weeks. So if you're thinking of buying leaps, I would wait until 2 weeks because you could get, a lot more exposure you'll get a lot more time on your exposure. You'll have to pay a little bit more of a premium, but if you can get Jan 2029, you still have some extra juice on those leaps versus having to settle for the 2027s or 2028s. Moderna 154.50 as that's up 11%. Big move on Mr. Moderna. This thing fell to 134 last night. So you're seeing that get a nice little rebound. Again, the option flow on that is pretty strong. And then SoFi 1836 as that continues to be green. Don't be late. Yeah, I will absolutely. And when I show up on time tomorrow, I need everyone in the chat to be like, wow, that's great. Thanks for being here on time. We don't need her thinking that I've been late for the past 4 years when it comes to this show. So tomorrow I will be on my best behavior. You guys be on your best behavior. When I make a joke, you guys laugh. That's how, that's what we need to do tomorrow. Richmond Fed manufacturing survey. Let's pull this up. It looks like it's a slight beat. We also have some consumer confidence data. Let's pull this up right here and see how the market is reacting.
90.2. So less than expectations. Sequentially, obviously less than our last look. 89.4 would be the least since January. 89.0, second weakest of the year. Present situation, well, this is the bright spot. 121.2, significantly higher than expectations, significantly higher than a slight revision of 114.4 in the rearview mirror, and that would be the best overall performance since April, where over 124. And finally, on expectations or what lies ahead, this one, very similar to the headline, comes in deficient, 68.2, looking for a number over 74. 68.2 would be the lightest going back to, wow, you have to go back a ways. 68.2 would be the lightest since January when it was 67.2. So second weakest of the year, sequentially lower than 74.0. And very quickly, Richmond Fed for August comes in light at 4. And if we look at the business side or the service side, well under expectations at -12. That would be the weakest level of the year going all the way back to November. But manufacturing being positive just adds another positive anecdotal brick into the wall of recovery in manufacturing. We still have more data. Yes, we have our July read on new home sales. And for that, we go to Diana Olick. Diana?
Rick, 607,000 new home sales in July, seasonally adjusted annualized rate. That's a miss. The street was looking for 615. On the other hand, though, June's number was revised up from 628,000 to 678,000. So we're down 10.5% month to month and down 6.3% year over year. Inventory is rising. In July, it was 488,000. This is 1.9% above June and 1.6% year over year higher. And that represents a 9.6 month supply at the current sales pace, which is high. 6 is considered a balanced market. Median sale price of a newly sold home in July was $393,800. This is 2.3% below June and is 0.9% down year over year. Now, this count is based on signed contracts. So it's people.
Okay, so you got a miss on home builders, a slight miss on Richmond Fed, and a slight miss on consumer confidence. So you got 3 misses right there. And then you have freaking OpenAI coming out with this statement. I don't know if this is going to help NVIDIA or not. OpenAI claims its new chips can outperform NVIDIA processors in tests. What new chips are they talking about? Are they talking about the chips they're working with Cerebras, the chips they're working on with Microsoft, the chips they're working on with Broadcom? What are they? All right. Semi-Analysis just put out an article. I think they're talking about the jalapeno chips with Cerebras. No, with Broadcom. With Broadcom. Yeah. Okay. So this is from Semi-Analysis with Broadcom. This is not really the best thing for NVIDIA. This is for everyone wondering why Jensen's pushing open source, is because he's really annoyed that one of his biggest customers, OpenAI, is now competing with him by building their own custom chips, which is why he's competing with their model business. Okay, so this is coming from SemiAnalysis. I'm seeing the article right now. OpenAI has spent the past couple of years quietly building Jalapeno, an inference chip just announced 2 months ago. Rumors of a successful tape-out had been swirling for a while, but now we have the details as OpenAI invited SemiAnalysis to go to their labs and check how real it is. Wow, okay. So if they actually invited the largest semiconductor research firm to take a look at these chips, and now this article is basically saying it's better than certain NVIDIA processors, yeah, that's something the market's probably going to pay attention to. Now, it's not an immediate red candle on NVIDIA. It's not like OpenAI is going to stop buying their chips. But once again, it's the one bear case on NVIDIA that's something you can't ignore. Ultimately, when you have 75% margins, people are going to try to go after a margin, whether it's Trainium, TPUs, this Jalapeno thing with Broadcom, Cerebras. Like, you're not going to have those margins forever. And I think at some point the discount on NVIDIA is because the market's feeling like that margin will not be there for the next 5 to 10 years, which is fine. The margins are supposed to come down a bit, but how quickly and how aggressively does that happen? Yeah, this entire article is going into the ASICs. I'm looking at all these different specs they're showing off right now. Zeta, that's down 2.4%. Netflix, that's down 1.2%. The SPY wasn't really affected that much by the Richmond Fed stuff. I mean, you got a couple red candles, but overall still green on the day, 765. The housing sales miss was obvious. I mean, it's tough right now in the housing market. It's not going to get any better with the 10-year yield pushing 4.7 because mortgage rates are basically at 7% at this point. Robinhood's still at 108, or 107.60, but it's not like it's new information to the market. That is interesting. Jalapeno will ship with HBM4, making this chip one of the relatively early adopters after NVIDIA and AMD even beating the established TPU and Trainium programs. Jalapeno is getting the most out of their HBM bandwidth, setting for anything but the best HBM would run counter to that goal. OpenAI has various engineering samples of Jalapeno. The Jalapeno architecture design focuses on eliminating fixed latencies and overheads in order to make it possible to get closer to the raw peak flops or bandwidth, even for small batches or shapes as compared to other accelerators. This is part of the reason why NVIDIA bought Grok, right? They needed to have a competitor when it came to LPU and SRAM architecture when it came to inference. And that's why they paid $20 billion like it was nothing to be able to have that acquisition. Broadcom, yeah, that's kind of weird. Why is Broadcom going down here? This Jalapeno thing is with Broadcom, right? It's not with Cerebras. OpenAI Jalapeno. I'm pretty sure this is the Broadcom chip. Yeah, this is Broadcom. Broadcom should be going up right now. The title of the article is literally OpenAI Jalapeno better than NVIDIA's Blackwell. That is so weird that Broadcom is not getting a boost on this. Maybe the market's saying we don't believe it, but usually the market reacts to these semi-analysis headlines a bit more aggressively. I bought Broadcom last week. I don't think it deserves to be falling here, but that sell side report probably took it down a bit more. Palantir, that one flipped red, 179 to 175, as that is also red. OpenAI, look, it's interesting, right? OpenAI wouldn't invite SemiAnalysis to their labs to do these tests if they didn't want this information getting out there. So even if they acknowledge that, like, we still love NVIDIA and we still are working with NVIDIA, yada, yada. I mean, Jensen just gave them $30 billion in the latest funding round. There's a reason they want frontier research labs to look at what they're doing. Ironically, Broadcom going down, NVIDIA getting a bit of a green candle. So it's almost like the market's ignoring this headline. And quite frankly, they should. It's not like Jalapeno is going to start selling over the world. It's an ASIC at the end of the day. It's not a GB300 that can be sold anywhere. But you do have this being put out there. Netflix still at 81, Meta at 563. It's not easy to beat the top of the line processor. AMD is still trying to beat Intel in the CPU market. Intel failed to beat Qualcomm and mobile. AMD and Intel both failed to beat NVIDIA and GPU. Yeah, and that's why these custom ASICs, they're not going to be general purpose to the point where they can be sold everywhere because it's really hard for it to be. But if one of your biggest customers is OpenAI and they stop spending as much, which I don't think this is going to stop them from spending as much, but Jensen understands the writing on the wall. He's like, they're obviously not building a chip for the hell of it. Like, they're building it so that they can be less reliant on me. It's that signal that the market always tries to figure out when exactly does that switch happen. And I mean, Apple, 10 years ago when they left Intel, they started building their own chips. I mean, took 25 years for Intel to get even kind of close to all-time highs, as Intel's up 1.7% today. But when Apple abandoned them, it just happened. And then boom, Intel lost a ton of business as Apple started building their own chips. Bloom right there, that continues to stay in that 214 range. And it is still green. SPY looks like it wants to go red. It does not look like it wants to hold this little 0.2% move. Where is the 10-year? India just purchased a ton of NVIDIA chips for data centers. Yeah, I saw that headline. There's been a couple of sovereigns that have started purchasing a lot more from NVIDIA. 10-year Treasury 4.6, so we haven't spiked up, which is good. Oil still at 82.40, down 3%. Which also hasn't spiked up. And that is good as well. Even though Bitcoin's not moving, Hood is having a nice day. Bitcoin, we're still below 79, right? Well, no, we're basically at 79. Okay, so Hood's kind of moving with Bitcoin here then. Got to see if we can break through that. Can Pelosi please buy CoreWeave? Dude, it's interesting. Outside of like Brad Gerstner, you haven't seen a lot of the big guys. Did Chase Coleman buy? Let me check. He's at Tiger Global. You didn't see Nebbia show up on any of these 13Fs besides situational awareness or CoreWeave. Chase Coleman bought Core Scientific, which CoreWeave was going to buy last year, but they ultimately didn't. 817,000 shares. Yeah, you haven't seen, or Iran, you haven't seen any of the big neoclouds show up on these 13Fs. At least not recently. BMNR flipping green. Ethereum 2465. By the way, I feel like I have to tell you guys this because I don't lie to you guys. But that whole smelling defeat, that was a Drake lyric. It was from the song 0 to 100, where he said, people are smelling defeat in the air. So, yeah, it wasn't necessarily original, but the way that it was applied in the context of Netflix and stock analysis was original. But it is what it is. Sometimes the best original jokes come from stealing other people's material. So just letting you guys know, tomorrow, if you hear something like that, even if it's not original, you still need to laugh. You still need to laugh. That's why it was trash. Amit as a ghostwriter. It's such a good bar. They're smelling defeat in the air. Like who thinks of that stuff, It's inspiring. Helps me use that same analysis when it comes to talking about stocks. XRP is down 4%. Seeing some of these old coins starting to get hit. Wall Street Journal going to call and cancel now. Dude, that'd be so funny if they canceled. It was actually supposed to happen last week, but something came up. It'd be funny. She's like, yeah, I saw your stream yesterday. I just think, maybe we'll do this another time. I'd be like, you don't have to say anything. I know. I understand. SoFi 1859, as that is still below 19, but at least it's up. Again, this jalapeno news, this is kind of the biggest thing this morning. Broadcom not reacting to it, and NVIDIA not really reacting to it either. China rejects the planned U.S. sanctions expansion and said it would safeguard its rights and interests. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman said that he opposed the sanctions. China has called them illegal. China remains the largest buyer of Iranian oil through trade, though trade has declined under the U.S. blockade. The economic minister of Iran said that Iran was prepared and had a wider 2-year plan to manage some of these sanctions. Okay, so I mean, look, this is a big deal because China buys the majority of the oil from Iran, right? So if China's not really on board with it, which they were never going to be on board with this, but if they're not even willing to cooperate, Epsilon up 13%. These insider buys continue to be bullish. You know, the U.S. is going to have to ask themselves how seriously can we implement this strategy if we're not going to get some support from anyone else. Wow, DIX down 26%. Goodness. 25.7 off I mean, it wasn't that big of a miss on EPS. It was 5%. And then they said footwear is slowing down a bit. Like 25% feels a little aggressive on that. But that's down. But that is down. Memory's also starting to sell off a little bit. Yeah, that candle just came out of nowhere on Micron, 921.83. Down from 930. Bloom also just got hit. It was at 215, now 211. I mean, if Intel goes below 87, that would be the same reaction like it had yesterday. NVIDIA, obviously, 214.50 looks like it was the top, at least for today, 213. Are we about to lose that? If we do, we're seeing the 212s. Rocket Lab, this is a little aggressive, dude. SpaceX isn't even red. This one should not be down this much today. Like, is there some story about Rocket Lab we don't know? Like, why is... It's just been 5 red days in a row, every day gradually declining. Broadcom, still flat. And ServiceNow, that's down. Consumers are going broke. Well, again, you know, some companies are saying that, other companies are not. It's just we're not seeing it in the aggregate data. Even consumer confidence, it was a slight miss today, right? Now, retail sales was a miss last month, but like we need real data that shit's hitting the fan. And you're not seeing that in unemployment, you're not seeing that in the labor market, you're not seeing that in JOLTS. You're seeing that in some of these company earnings, which shouldn't be ignored. Unless you think all the data that we're getting from the BLS is just fake, which maybe it is. It's just jobless claims is hard to fake. Jobless claims is literally how many people are filing for unemployment. And it's been lower than 220,000 every week for the past year and a half. So I feel like that might not be the biggest issue. Maybe it's valuation. I mean, look, I'm not a fan of Rocket Lab's valuation either. But at some point, there's a buyer and a seller, and they create a base to the stock. And usually around this range is when Rocket Lab stops seeing the amount of selling pressure that it's seen over the past couple of weeks. So it'll be interesting to see if it continues falling forward. Meta 563, Uber over 80. So your Ubers, your Netflix, your Airbnbs, they're doing okay as that continues to go higher. I mean, dude, if Uber actually can get to like 85, 90, I think it's going all the way. There's too many big names that are in this stock, and it's still trading too cheap relative to the earnings for the robotaxi threat to be the biggest impediment to the stock going higher. Like at the end of the day, the robotaxi thing is a narrative. It's not rooted in anything fundamental yet. Maybe eventually it will be, but not yet. And the reason I say yet is because the numbers aren't showing any, meaningful decline of growth on Uber's side yet. So, if you're not seeing that, maybe we don't see as much pain. Let's get some analysis on the political backlash to AI data centers, as that's been heating up a bit more and has created a little bit more pain when it comes to some of these neoclouds.
Is all of this political backlash factoring into the conversations around materiality, risk factors in terms of really financing this build out?
Leslie, good morning, and thank you guys so much for having me this morning. Just like any other big infrastructure project, railways, highways, toll roads, data centers require community support, and that is just one of the vectors of risk that you need to assess whenever you're doing a big infrastructure project. So whether that's community support, appropriate zoning, entitlement, having the right support from the financing markets, the right sort of contract structure, there are always a series of risks whenever you have a financing project in infrastructure, and it's up to the finance markets, banks, private credit, institutional markets, to make sure that those risks are appropriately mitigated before you go and lend what is now pretty frequently multiple billions of dollars to a given build in a given market.
Is it changing the
Bro, what is semi-analysis doing? I just saw the headline picture, the thumbnail they used for this article. What is this, dude? Look at this. What are they doing? Lisa Su and Jensen crying with Sam Altman and Hock Tan holding a jalapeno? Like, is that just me, or is that kind of cringe, bro? Or maybe I'm making too much of it. It's just a joke, but like, I mean, again, you think OpenAI is upset about this? No, they want the pressure to be on Jensen. They want the pressure to be on AMD. They want to be seen as a company that can't be messed around with just because they're spending all this CapEx, which is why I think they invited Semi-Analysis to do this research. But it's like, I don't think Jensen's like the happiest seeing this stuff because he needs to protect his margins.
The pricing at all, given that it can cause delays, given, a lack of municipality support for these types of projects. So, is it changing the pricing discussions? Or people pulling out altogether? Or has it just really not gotten to that point yet?
Well, look, as a banker covering the sector, I can say that, commercial dialogue between data center builders, their hyperscale tenants, the industry are always constantly evolving to serve both the return requirements of the customer, the delivery needs of the customer, and the return requirements of the data center builder, right? And so pricing is going to constantly evolve no matter what. I would say the pricing that we're seeing remains remarkably robust, which is what's enabling the formation of all of this capital, right? We've seen, for example, in the 144A market, which opened for data center construction just this time last year, the issuance of order of magnitude $50 billion of credit into that market. That wouldn't be possible if we didn't have an environment where risks were thoughtfully mitigated, pricing was robust and ensured appropriate return on capital, and folks wanted to continue coming back to the markets from a supply and demand perspective to make sure that all of this gets built and we continue to have the compute infrastructure that as a nation we're going to rely on going forward.
So a lot of the financing for that compute, again, continues to be secure. That's what the whole Jensen $500 billion announcement was. Meta 562, trying to get back to 565. But the financing really doesn't matter if the politicians, whether it's Greg Abbott, Ron DeSantis, et cetera, Micron losing everything right here, or Kathy Hochul aren't on board with it. Right, so it's not even a question of financing anymore. It's SPY loses 765, Bloom loses 210. Freaking OpenAI, bro. Like this, I don't know if this jalapeno article marked the top for today, but maybe it does. Yeah, the money's there. It's just the question, as Intel's about to lose 88, if there's political will to allow the money to be dispersed in the ecosystem. I mean, the money is absolutely there in a pretty meaningful way. Netflix right there going great. So Netflix going up, and I bet Uber is going up with it. Uber going up at the same time while the semis fall is kind of what we saw over the past couple of days, that when Nebius gets a red candle, your Netflixes, your Ubers, your Airbnbs, they get a green candle. SanDisk goes red on the day. Goodness gracious. How about Lyft? We haven't looked at that in a minute. Lyft is also green with Uber. Redwire goes red. Lunar goes red. Applied Digital still up 3, but down from where it was before. MicroStrategy's up 2.5. Amcor is at least up a little bit today, but it's still down from the highs. It was down 5% yesterday. Rocket Lab at least above 66, now back to 67, but kind of the same playbook that we saw yesterday. It almost is 1030. Maybe you're going to get a little 1030 dump. Amid, I think people are selling the pumps anytime they can, really. I think definitely intraday, people have stop losses and they're just like, I am not going to sit around and bag hold anything. If I think momentum's dying out or it's getting weaker, I don't know when momentum's going to come back, so I'm going to get out before, things hit the fan. And I think that's fair, but it might be a more aggressive part of what we're seeing right here. This was the update on the China sanctions, by the way, that we heard 5 minutes ago.
Megan Casella has the latest from Washington. Megan.
Leslie, good morning. So Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's economic D-Day measures landing a little bit softly yesterday, something of a muted reaction after it was made clear that while Bessent was laying the groundwork for sweeping sanctions on any country doing business with Iran, he wasn't actually taking action just yet. Now, Bessent said that was by design. He said the U.S. was giving everyone the opportunity to remedy bad behavior, but that he didn't want, in his words, to blow up the global financial system. The primary target for any U.S. secondary sanctions is China, by far Iran's largest trading partner. And after Bessent pledged that no one was above the reach of U.S. sanctions, Beijing responded overnight, a Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson saying that China's cooperation with Iran should not be disrupted and that China will do everything necessary to firmly safeguard its rights and interests. So essentially, Bessent fired a warning shot here. Beijing then fired one right back. And for President Trump and for this administration, they're a little bit hamstrung here. There's a massive trade relationship at stake between the U.S. and China, and Beijing could inflict real economic pain on the U.S. if it moved to hike tariffs or to cut off the critical mineral supply, just to name two examples. President Trump has also been very focused on maintaining a strong relationship with President Xi and making Xi's visit to the White House, planned for next month, a success. But all of that said, China bought about 90% of Iran's oil before the war. So it's really difficult to choke off funding to Iran without truly targeting Beijing. Guys.
So China and their response, once again, the market's going to have to interpret how deeply they care about the response and if these negotiations or these sanctions are even real, given they haven't been really imposed yet, as she just said, because Bessent is trying to give the Iranians some time to agree to these negotiations, which maybe they do, maybe they don't. We'll see what the Pakistani intermediaries say this week. But I mean, that is the broader question before you have this massive economic pressure that's put on Iran. BMNR, that's up 5. Hood's also up. Now, Bitcoin and ETH aren't really moving, folks. I mean, not that aggressively. So you're seeing the derivative plays kind of front run what maybe the market thinks will be a much larger move on ETH and BTC. Bitcoin, we are above 79. It's not a massive jump, but it was at 78.5 a couple minutes ago. ETH still not above 2,500. Broke resistance. When's the last time we saw 25 on Bitmine? Yeah, it looks like February. Even in April, we got to 24. And then it fell to 12 in July. So yeah, this is a basically 5-month breakout above 25. It's up more than 100% from the lows. Uber still at 80. Netflix also getting a nice little move, 81.57. It's up 25% for the week. Yeah, I mean, look, it's encouraging. The volume's coming back. Bitmine used to be, I think, in the top 50 stocks traded every day when it launched. I mean, it had a lot of excitement. Then obviously ETH fell and it went out of favor. But if that comes back, you know, you will have more speculation in that ecosystem. Intel 88, SPY 764, Bloom 211. SoFi's up, Netflix is up, Hood is up, and Reddit's up. Those are your beneficiaries right here. SoFi 1874 compared to the semi names that are still kind of falling off. Outside of SMCI is having a great day. There's got to be a headline here that's helping this one. Almost back to where it was after earnings. SK Hynix, yeah, I mean, that's down with all the memory names in general, but still somewhat green, 157. SMCI expands their NVIDIA AI factory stack with Cisco is the headline. The offering will support NVIDIA Vera Rubin NVL72, combining Supermicro's liquid and air-cooled servers with Cisco networking. Is Cisco up? Cisco is slightly up, so it looks like that's helping SMCI the most. Thoughts on Keel? So again, I will say the same thing I've said about Keel over and over. They're a very small data center. I think one deal reframes the narrative and, you know, gets this thing above $3, given it's a $2 billion market cap. Their data centers are primed for Vera Rubin, which is actually not the easiest thing to have if you're a data center, right? A lot of them are built for Blackwell and Hopper, so being ready to adapt to NVIDIA's latest architecture is really important. And then there's a bunch of insider buying. That's my thesis on it. It's a very small position. I don't think it's, you know, something that you should bet the house on. But I do think when you have the insiders buying and you have a deal that's more likely than not with data centers that are prepped for the best architecture of chips, then it's just a question of, do they get a deal? And if they do, which if the demand is as strong as we're seeing across the entire market, then I think a speculative bet on that is not that crazy. But obviously, it's not anywhere near the caliber of Nebius or CoreWeave or even Iran with contracted power capacity. And so that's kind of the thesis on that. SPY is about to go red at the same time the broader market is not necessarily going red. Did Trump just tweet again? Trump just tweeted, okay. I have just been informed by the United States Navy that all mines have been removed and or detonated from within the international waters of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has been notified that any ship or boat placing new mines will be immediately and systematically destroyed. Through Space Force, we are watching every square inch of the strait, as we are also with the Pickaxe Mountain and the already destroyed 3 other nuclear sites. There is zero tolerance policy on mine placement in full force and effect. Thank you for your attention to this matter. That's a repeat tweet. You guys heard that before? I don't think we've heard that one before. I mean, he's talked about mines before, but I don't think it was phrased exactly like that. Well, I don't know if the market's going to interpret that. It is? He's tweeted that already? Was it word for word exactly like the South Korea one? It was word for word? If that's the case, then this is the second verbatim tweet that he posted again. I don't remember hearing this last week. Even though he's been talking about the mines, for a while. He also just tweeted about Canada 5 minutes ago. Over the last 10 years, the United States lost on average $60 billion a year with Canada, no more. So another Canada tweet. Yeah, it's not word for word, right? I don't think it's word for word. Some of you guys are saying yes. Well, regardless, it's once again showing that the United States is not going to tolerate mine placement. But then again, the Iranians have continued to do what they do, even with the U.S. removing mines. So it's just a lot of back and forth at this point. And until we actually see both sides come to the table, which I think he's saying this again because he knows the Iranians want to talk and they've already given some concessions and they're trying to get to a deal. It's just a question of will this new economic pressure actually create some type of a deal? Bitcoin 79.3. Hoodie loves it. I think Hood and BMNR are getting a front run right here. They should not be up this much relative to the crypto move today, but because they are, I think that's the crypto algo saying we think there's going to be a relatively decent crypto move soon. I'm hoping that's the reason. Robin are trying to go for 110, which it didn't even hit last week, right? It got rejected at around 109. Yeah, it got rejected at 109 on the dot last week, a little bit above 109. So it's already above where it was last week. ASST, Bitcoin Treasury, it should be up. I mean, all the derivative crypto names are going to be up, which is why you're seeing some green. Yeah, it is weird if that was the same tweet. MicroStrategy 127. Okay, put in the chat if you are positioned in your portfolio in a meaningful manner, whatever meaningful means to you, to take advantage of a crypto bull market and an exiting of the crypto winter. And it's okay if you're not, right? That just might not be where your portfolio is. For me, it's just Hood, and Hood's been a call option on crypto for a while, but I think Hood's also a legit business. That's also why when Bitcoin goes to winter, Hood falls 50%, which we dealt with, back in February, March, April. But that's the main exposure. Obviously BMNR, but I'm still bag holding that. So realistically, even if ETH doubles, it'll be a break even. So I don't think it's going to be positioning to take advantage of it, but it'll at least be recovering some losses. But Hood would be the one that, Hood could see 150 again, dude. If Bitcoin gets up to 120, Hood's going for it. It's just the question of, is Bitcoin actually going to go to 150 by end of year? Is that really, or 120, 130? Could that happen? I see a meaningful chunk of yeses. Let's do a poll on this. And then the separate question is, if you're not currently positioned for it, are you thinking of being positioned for it? AKA, are some of these names worth a gamble here just in case? Is a few hundred shares of a Bitmine or a Robinhood just for this rally part of the process? Or do you just not care? Because if you didn't care about crypto for the past few years. You don't care about it now, and it's not worth trying to establish even a trading position on. Okay, are you positioned for a crypto bull run? We'll do yes. We'll do no. We'll do somewhat. Somewhat is like you have some exposure, but you don't really. It's not a sizable amount where it's going to make a big difference for you. But it'll still help, right? No is just like no. I don't have anything that if Bitcoin goes up, nothing is going to really change in my portfolio. Which, quite frankly, if you're all in the semis, Bitcoin going up is not really, unless Bitcoin and the semiconductors move in a risk-on environment, which right now they're kind of going inverse of each other, then you kind of don't need Bitcoin because you've already had a good year. Because the semis have, massively outperformed everything. Garcia said I sold Bitcoin at 80K. Few people saying they already took some profits on some of their crypto names, which I think, look, if crypto tops out right here, obviously taking some profits is a good thing because no one wants to be bag holding after a year of already, even if you weren't bag holding, underperforming, because obviously any crypto derivative has massively underperformed like a lot of other parts of the market. I have more gold. Well, gold and Bitcoin have been moving together. So, I mean, if Bitcoin goes to 100K, I wonder if, I think logically gold goes higher, right? It would be kind of fascinating if they actually went inverse. 47% say yes, 31% say no, 22% say somewhat. Okay, so still a decent chunk of people that don't necessarily have exposure or need exposure on BTC. AMD, that's up 4%. Do you have Bitcoin? No. I do not own Bitcoin. Just own HOOD. HOOD, there you go, 110. There she is, 110.23 as that goes higher. IBIT call options got the highest amount of volume they had in 5 months yesterday. So you do have a lot more people betting on Mr. IBIT. Oklo, some nuclear names are getting some love today. That's also up 5.4%. Accelerate continues, dude. I mean, the fact that insiders are buying after the positive drug results means they continue to be bullish. That's up 14%. Yeah, look, again, I think there are some proxies that are really specialized to take advantage of a real crypto market. And they did in October last year. It's just the problem is a lot of people thought, including myself, Bitcoin wouldn't fall 50%, and it did. Coinbase up 4%, and that's why a lot of these names took a really ugly breather. I'm looking at the volume profile on HOOD. That is a massive green candle that just came in. Whether that's a fund, not even on the chart, but the green candle on the volume profile is like aggressive. So someone is buying here. And Bitcoin's, again, not really moving, right? I mean, it's 79.1. It's not like it's at 80K. So SoFi should benefit too. I mean, SoFi's kind of in that fintech crypto world, even if they don't benefit that much from crypto. Webull also should benefit. The Webull CEO was live yesterday. He said we're seeing like a 3x increase in the amount of spot Bitcoin and ETH purchase volume that we're getting in. So I think Webull and all the other brokerages should somewhat like it. NVIDIA actually is losing 212 at the same time as the crypto names are going higher to 1150. And the semi's kind of chilling off a little bit. What do you think about LEU? I have not looked that deeply into them, but this is Centrus Energy is one of the better nuclear names that are out there. And yeah, they do use Palantir, but I have a couple friends that are in this, and they got in this very early a year ago when it really started to take off. I mean, if I had to pick between Oklo, Centrus, and SMR, it's Centrus any day of the week. Like, they've actually shown they can generate real revenue and get larger deals. Reddit right there, that's up 3.7. Where's Shopify? Shopify nicely sitting at 153. That's also been up. Are you adding to your NVIDIA position here? No. NVIDIA's got to be 190 to add again. It's like, I've added enough NVIDIA this year. I'm not it's time for NVIDIA to just do its thing. Sometimes it's just time for the stock to do it. Like, you can't even, like it's over, right? It's like, all right, I've added. You have to now show the market that you're worthy of getting a higher multiple. No, I'm not adding here, especially not before earnings. You just never know, right? So if it really takes like a 5-10% decline after earnings and it's like amazing numbers, maybe that's the place to add, but I don't think before earnings is the best. Sticks is still down 27% right here as this is still getting hit. Okay, so interesting dynamics. Consumer defensives are down. Trump continues to tweet about Canada. The Iran pseudo deal was kind of put into motion today with Pakistani intermediaries, which is why I think we're even seeing any green today. Oil is still down. The 10-year is at least under control. Palantir and software names are going red as, honestly, it's not even the semis that are pumping. The crypto names are pumping, so maybe it's taking liquidity out of IGV and SMH together. SMH is still somewhat green on the day, still 1%. Just some of the semi names like Broadcom and NVIDIA losing their steam. Bloom as well, still up 3%, but down from 215. Melly, this one's actually been doing really good recently. Melly back above 2,000. Year to date, I think it's up a decent chunk now. No, it's still up 1% this year. Damn, it was at 2,200 in January, but over the past month, it's up 10%. Past 5 days, it's up 12%. So it started to get a bigger breakout. I really, really wonder what's going to happen if we see a crypto breakout when it comes to the other sectors. Because the thing about crypto thing is, it's like if Bitcoin falls $3,000 tomorrow, all these crypto names are going to get hit. And it is just so volatile. And I don't think anyone fully knows if, Bitcoin's actually going to break 80, hold 80 meaningfully, then break 90, hold 90 meaningfully. Whereas in 2025, it felt like it was a given. Like every couple $1,000 was like, oh, of course we're going to break the next level. Whereas now I think there's so much fear that it might not actually make its move. And it's already made a pretty big move from the 60s. So that consolidation phase is just so annoying because then the crypto stocks don't know what to do. The crypto macro assets are kind of just like trading on random algos and catalysts that aren't really catalysts. Like there's no real trend. And I think that's what everyone's seeing to discover. Is there a trend? And then you have this 10-year treasury that continues to compete with corporate debt. So this was a good clip from Josh Brown's podcast yesterday breaking down why Google, Meta, Amazon issuing this debt is an issue for the broader 10-year and what Bessent talked about last week when he said that these companies should be issuing more short-term treasuries versus long-term debt.
Alphabet selling bonds would impact the price of a long-term treasury.
Sure. As a bond investor, you got to think about risk, right? Now, treasuries have been notionally the risk-free rate and still are from an academic standpoint. And certainly they're money good as far as getting repaid. But I would put it this way. If I told you I was going to sell you either a Google 10-year bond or a US 10-year treasury, which do you think will trade better? Or which do you think is more notionally secure? Because on the one hand, you have, yes, the US government ability to tax. Great. On the other hand, you have Google's cash flows, which are profound. And in some ways, Google, I think I could argue, is at least as safe as the US government because it's a global business and very well managed. So as a bond investor, you're thinking, okay, what is risk? We've just seen TLT compound at negative 4% over the last 6 years. That's real risk. So I think bond investors look at this more holistically than perhaps an equity investor thinks they probably should, but they're just looking for the right amount of yield with relatively little risk. Remember, bond investors are risk averse. The best they can do is get what they're promised back again, coupons and principal. They're just looking to get their coupons and get their principal back. That's all they want. And Google's just as likely to do that as the US government.
You're not making a bet that Google is going to outperform the NASDAQ or that Google's stock will be higher. The bet is Google will give me back my principal and they're going to pay the interest rate. And there won't be insane volatility along the way toward that happening. The yield is going to be higher than what a comparable maturity treasury might yield. And that's because Google is not sovereign, doesn't have the Marines and the Coast Guard and a Navy, but it's got other attributes that maybe in times like these are as or even more attractive than the safety that you feel buying a 10-year treasury.
And that's the issue, right? Like, yeah, if I don't think Google's going to go bankrupt, then I'd rather buy Google's bonds instead of our government's bonds and get an extra 100 to 200 basis points of yield. So as long as Google doesn't go bankrupt, that's all I need. I don't need the stock to grow earnings 50%. I just need them to stay solvent. and they have more than enough cash flows to do that. NVIDIA, 214.73 to 211.40 now. And that's the pressure that's on the 10-year. So until that pressure kind of chills out, or until inflation expectations go down, that pressure will continue to remain a bit more competitive with this 10-year yield. Lyft, that's at 17. ETH still below 2,500. Netflix getting a nice move above 81. Uber losing 80. Yeah, Google also doesn't have 40 trillion in debt. That's fair. Yes, we will have Technical Tuesday today. We'll have Zoom earnings, and then I think it's Intuit, right? Yeah, Zoom and Intuit, and then we'll have Jason come on, and then we'll do TT. Bitcoin's still a little stuck. The Canadian Prime Minister was live about 20 minutes ago. Let's hear what he had to say about what's going on right now between Canada and the U.S.
Having a constructive relationship with the government of the United States, our most important trading partner. So I, like many of your viewers, saw the different posts yesterday, including from some Canadian premiers who would be the equivalent of your state governors. But honestly, my focus and the Prime Minister's focus is to build a Canadian economy the best way we can. We think a strong Canadian economy is a valuable partner in North American competitiveness. So we're going to continue to do that. And I'm not trying to duck your question, but we have deliberately not responded as a federal government to some of the stuff that on our side or your side of the border.
Dominic, help us understand, and we don't need to relitigate it, but I think we all want to understand what went wrong as you see it during those talks. There's been a lot of efforts even in the past 72 hours to try to reconstruct what went wrong. And I still don't think that there's an agreement on either side about what is the sticking point here.
So, and you're right, that's a question that, again, on both sides of the border, I think gets a lot of interest. President Trump at the end of July had threatened 50% tariffs on about 28 billion Canadian dollars of exports to the United States. That would have been 40 to 50,000 jobs in our country put at risk. This is in addition to the sectoral tariffs, the 232 tariffs in steel, aluminum, automobiles, in our case, softwood lumber. So what that did is it prompted a new round of negotiations, an intensity of negotiations. I have a constructive and frankly, I think an effective relationship with Ambassador Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative. He has been at all times a professional, accessible. I think he's acted in good faith, as have we. So he and I began with our colleagues a process of negotiation. And President Trump on Wednesday extended the deadline 3 days, saying that he believed they had a deal with Canada. We were more careful. We said we're close to a deal. We're making real progress. And on Friday night, at the deadline the president set, Prime Minister Carney was unable to conclude that in totality, we had what we thought was a deal before us that would have been in the economic interest of the country. Canada's in a different economic position than other trading partners, the most important customer of the United States, but the most integrated in supply chains, particularly in these sectors.
The thing we're trying to understand here is you're saying you have a great relationship with Ambassador Greer. We've read stories about some daylight between Greer and Lutnick coming in later in the process, and whether that was the issue, whether there was a misunderstanding about what these auto tariffs were, and whether they would also include semi-trucks and other kinds of trucks, and what that would mean.
Medium
for
and heavy-duty
steel.
trucks,
This idea about language, whether the French language could be used in different distinctions, which something, by the way, Jameson Greer says he's never even heard of, but it appears that Mark Carney seemed to allude to. Explain it to us if you can.
Yeah, so those are examples, I think good examples. The Prime Minister used them at a news conference on Saturday in Ottawa, of where in those final hours last Friday evening, we concluded there was a gap that made the deal impossible. So the automotive industry in Canada, highly integrated with the United States, the parts industry, this is an example over decades of that integration. We had always been, in our discussions with the Americans, recognizing that President Trump has redesigned his trading relationships with all of the partners in the world, including Canada. We started from the USMCA position of zero tariffs. Then the president brought in a series of tariffs in these sectors. We accepted that no country was going to trade tariff-free with the United States. That's a significant departure for us. But because of that integration and because of the North American competitiveness, we wanted to end up in the best situation of all the trading partners, particularly in the auto sector. So to use that example, Canadian automotive production is cars, but there's a very significant production of medium and heavy-duty trucks from Ford and GM that are exported to the United States. So if we were negotiating with Ambassador Greer in good faith to reduce the tariffs on autos, We had always been clear, certainly from our side, that it had to include these medium and heavy duty trucks. Otherwise, the prime minister would have been in an untenable position of agreeing to an automotive deal that would have left very significant present and future production outside this tariff advantage. That's one example. The question around language, we had agreed to remove the taxes. We got rid of the digital services tax, as President Trump was requiring, and we reduced the payments or the taxes that would have applied to American streamers. Think of Netflix. But in Canadian law, we have always had, because of the fact that 25% of the Canadian population is Francophone, but not only that, to be able to promote Canadian culture, Canadian stories, Canadian artists, there were requirements around discoverability and visibility. So on these platforms, Canadian content, including French language content, would be accessible. We had always said in our discussions that those for us were not part of the negotiation, those requirements around discoverability, but the financial aspects, the payments had been resolved. So those are two examples in a frankly, a basket of probably half a dozen, where at the end, we didn't think we had arrived at an agreement that was in the economic interest of Canada. That's why on Friday evening, the negotiations weren't able to conclude positively.
Minister LeBlanc, this is the last thing Canada needs. And I'm not sure whether you have a good feel for changes that need to be made in the economic approach of Canada. I know you're familiar with GDP, personal GDP actually falling most years in Canada. The OECD projects that Canada, out of 38 OECD members, will rank 38, dead last in GDP per capita growth through 2060. And I'm trying to figure out why. I looked to see, and I do find one thing. It says here, tax and regulatory competitiveness. There's a gap even with the U.S. where we think permitting, and we've got all these problems down here. How bad is it in Canada? And what changes do you think need to be made at this point? I don't think you're really negotiating from a strong position based on these things.
Well, that is where I might respectfully disagree with you. I think that if Canada is the top export destination for 26 U.S. states, we sell oil and gas and potash essential to the U.S. manufacturing economy, huge value added in the United States. So we can find compelling examples where trade done properly benefits both countries. But I certainly take your question in terms of the regulatory burden, in terms of tax competitiveness. Those are issues that Prime Minister Carney ran on in the election last year. He got a mandate to be able to ensure that federal permitting, for example, of these major projects, think of big energy projects, think of clean energy projects, port infrastructure. We're diversifying our trade relationships around the world. We've signed in the last year 20 deals worth tens of billions of dollars with other economies. So we've been very active in looking at new trading relationships, at diversifying the economy, but share your concern around the competitiveness in a tax and permitting context. And we have taken, and we will continue. In fact, we're introducing legislation in Parliament next month to deal with accelerated permitting, exactly along the lines of what you mentioned.
Okay.
Look, I think even with the diversification of new trade deals and trading partners for Canada and the U.S., it's still a very, very big economy. It's still a trading relationship that contributes to both economies. So, if they want to say they can diversify, that's fine. That's not going to stop the intense amount of their economy that's driven by the U.S. And for us, they're also a really big partner for us, and we can't necessarily afford to lose them either. So I think this is just going to be a game where both sides go back and forth. But a lot of these details of entertainment or autos and all this stuff going back and forth, these are things they have to negotiate on. These are not things that necessarily I think are going to be the big sticking points of if we get a deal or not. Nebius right there, 217. SPY is basically flat right here, as you're not really seeing much after it basically fell from 766. Rocket Lab at least getting a little bit of love back to 67. But still relatively red. I think the U.S. can afford to lose to Canada. I don't think Trump would be tweeting about Canada 5 times a day if he was just okay with never trading with them again. As much as we think the United States is amazing and our economy is the best and stuff, there's still partners that we need to trade with. Mexico and Canada are still really important. We still have rising oil prices. We still need people to buy our stuff. Would the U.S. be okay without it? Yeah, we could survive without it, but nonetheless, you still don't want to lose that additional business. And in general, I don't think, Trump hates Carney. I mean, they were seen laughing with each other. What was it, at the Super Bowl? Or what? They were at some place, or no, it was at the World Cup. these are not two guys that like have disdain for each other. I think it's just negotiating tactics at this point to get the business done. Q 710. That's also up 0.52% on the day. Amit, that was really funny. I'm just practicing for tomorrow. Thank you, Dangier. Thank you. She actually just texted me, the journalist. She was like, are we still good for tomorrow? I was like, yep. I'm not telling her. And I told all you guys to make sure I look good tomorrow. But we have a deal. We should have a deal. Wow, Amit, that was so funny. Thank you, Robert. That's what we need to. I'm pretty sure she'll have her phone and be going through the comments as well in the chat. So just need to make sure that we crush this tomorrow, Clean the apartment. The apartment is clean. Just very clean. Yes, we will have Technical Tuesday today. See, you guys are doing great. Look at that. Laughing emojis. Great insight, Amit. Amit, stop. You're killing me. That's funny, Amit. This is great. This is what we need. This is exactly how we need to frame this tomorrow. OMG, Amit, where do you come up with this stuff? It's so funny. Thank you. This is all I'm asking for. I don't ask for much. This is all I'm asking for. Wow, Moderna, 150. Dude, this thing was 134 yesterday. The volatility on this is crazy. NVIDIA and Perplexity partner to launch new agents. Okay, NVIDIA is definitely investing in Perplexity. Definitely. If they're partnering on a new agent product, $30 billion valuation. It's not officially announced that they're investing yet, but it looks like it is. Wow. CEO says we want to go public by 2028. NVIDIA go public, or not NVIDIA, Perplexity go public by 2028. What do you guys think? Could they actually go public? I mean, if they get revenues, Robinhood getting another breakout, if they can get revenues back to or up to 1.5 to 2 billion. They're at 750 million right now. And maybe, well, they would be going for like a 50 billion valuation at that point. It should be 25 times sales, which I guess is not that crazy. But it's at 30 right now. Yeah, Moderna was 134 yesterday. I mean, this is massive. Just, it was down 15% yesterday. It's basically up all of that and more today. I will not do the Dublin joke for her tomorrow. I'm going to have to be more original. Now I have pressure to think of a joke for tomorrow. Now I have to have something. Now I need something. I wonder if she'll ask about your relationship with Davis. I don't think she knows that much of the inside jokes in our community. She says she's watched the stream here and there. She watched it the day that I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was the day that Trump got rid of the reciprocal tariffs last year. So she's been keeping up with it for a while, but and then the day that Trump announced that the Dow Jones or the market hit an all-time high, and all of us were like, what is he talking about? The S&P is like nowhere near all-time highs, but it was the Dow Jones that actually hit an all-time high. So she's seen a few of those streams. NVIDIA 211, it's really about to lose 211 here. This is kind of crazy, but maybe it's about to lose it. Canada, they have officially announced new retaliatory tariffs. They're live right now. 15 to 50% tariffs on 20 billion of US products. Okay. We do 50%, they do 50%. Canada doubles tariffs on US steel products to 50% from 25%. That's not, yeah, NVIDIA losing 211. I don't know if the market's going to like that at all. I don't know if the market's going to like that at all. I mean, 210.95. Steel 50 from 25. 15 to 50%. They're live right now. Let me pull up to this. But then this is not the US and China going back and forth. So I wonder just how seriously is the market going to take this? With doubling tariffs is a bit aggressive though. It's not like it's nothing here that they're increasing when it comes to these tariffs.
Solomon, they all have great long titles, so I will present them later. But really important for you to know that we are all here with also Giovanna Mingarelli and Révolution. Au tarif imposé, François-Philippe Champagne, ministre.
In the right order. Bonjour tout le monde. Bon matin. Hello everyone. Merci Mona de l'introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, Canadians who are watching from coast to coast. I just want to start. Je vais saluer d'abord ma collègue, la ministre Joly. Merci Madame la ministre. Évidemment, on sera au rendez-vous. C'est ça le message qu'on vous envoie ce matin avec la ministre Joly, le ministère de l'Économie, le ministère de l'Industrie ici au Canada. Ma collègue Patty Hajdu, qui évidemment.
Okay, I'll go back when they're speaking English because I do not know what they're saying. I don't think a lot of you guys know what they're saying. But they do speak two languages there, so they tend to, a lot of their public officials speak in both. NVIDIA 210.75 as that continues to fall. SPY looks like it wants to go red, but that's the major headline. 50% tariffs on steel, and then 15 to 50% tariffs on about 20 billion of products. September 8th is the day it will go live. 700 products. 15, 25, or 50%. Canadian government says it will introduce a $7.5 billion package to support businesses and workers that were hit by new U.S. tariffs. I still think this is so fake, dude. Like, I don't really think... I mean, they have to do this to respond to the U.S., and Trump has to do this because he wants to, stand on his principles of explaining why Canada's been ripping us off. Micron back up to almost 930. Nice little rebound from 916. But I guess for the next month, at least until September 8th, next few weeks, we will have to deal with this back and forth. And until then, I guess it's going to be the US versus Canada. It's just, dude, I don't believe any of this. It's so ridiculous. Greer will get in a room with these guys and they're going to figure something out. But until they do, it's another level of volatility that we can't ignore. And ultimately it might create some more choppiness for stocks.
He says the U.S. is considering changing the name of Lake Ontario to Lake America. Guys, we just really haven't quite seen this before. Canada is the first country in the West to stand up to the Trump administration's tariff agenda in this way. The country is essentially on war footing because of it. They're bracing for economic fallout, but they're unwilling to accept a bad deal, and they're saying that they're bearing down for the long haul. Back over to you.
Yeah, Megan, the war of words is significant at this point in time. And you've got support from China essentially backing the moves and standing up to the U.S. Have we heard from any other allies about this decision from Canada? And do we have any suspicion as to whether they might take similar measures in the future?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question whether the EU, whether other nations across Asia will be looking at Canada as an example of something that they want to do. So far, most of those countries that we might expect to be closely aligned with Canada on this have already struck their own deals, the kind of deal that Canada just decided not to take. What they've been doing in Ottawa is striking trade deals with other countries across the globe in a way to diversify their economy and get some of the business that they're now no longer getting from the United States. So to my knowledge, we haven't heard any sort of explicit response. The EU is the one that's most interesting to me in this setting, but we do know that Canada is continuing to have negotiations with the EU, and you can imagine that those will be very well supported on both sides now, even more so than before, to try to help Canada get through this. I will say Canada definitely is feeling an economic impact because of this dispute with the U.S. These negotiations have already been ongoing since the start of President Trump's second term. They're feeling this, but the polling behind Carney's decision to stand up to President Trump is really, really high right now, in contrast to where President Trump's own approval ratings stand. So he's got a lot of support for this and a lot of reason to keep pushing.
Yeah, and apparently, according to the Journal this morning, going to provide $7.5 Canadian dollars, $1 billion Canadian dollars for targeted firms and workers there. On the question of embargoes, so much of the fiery rhetoric centers around cutting them off from the U.S., that is, from electricity or rare earths or potash. Is that something we're watching seriously?
It's something to be the most braced for. Canada is by far the largest supplier of energy, of LNG, of crude to the U.S. It's where we get most of that electricity as well. And so Canada has that card to play if they wanted to really cut us off. You're hearing some fiery language from some premiers across the country. We're not hearing that from Prime Minister Carney himself yet. He explicitly did not mention energy when he was talking about the sectors that would be hit. But I do think that's one of the reasons that this conflict is so interesting to watch, because we're seeing Canada stand up in this way, support its own industry with the support measures that you mentioned, that billions of dollars, and go the long haul on this. And that's left in their arsenal, that they could cut off the U.S. supply to these energy markets if they wanted to. That would be very damaging, even more so than just affordability measures in the U.S.
Yeah, it really feels like a new moment in this ongoing trade war. Megan, thank you for following all the details for us. Megan Casella in D.C. Shifting to the broader markets.
Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Well, what do you do? What do you do? Iran, Canada, bond yields, rate hikes, oil prices. I mean, it's why the markets are so complex, but also why there's so much to kind of understand, to put the pieces to the puzzle together for the story. I do think, yeah, it probably shifts a little bit of the focus away from Iran. If we're focused on Canada, but again, I think the trade war thing is not going to last as long as the Iran war has. I think before the end of the year, this thing is over with Canada. I think it could be over, but before September is over. I just don't believe it's going to be that serious. Bitcoin 79.3. But who knows now? Maybe it lasts a lot longer. I need a vacation, boss. Oh my gosh. Right before the midterms too, right? Right before the midterms. Where's the VIX? We were at 14 last week. That's why we had one of those ugly days, because the VIX kind of spiked because it was inevitable. VIX is at 1574. VIX has been flat basically for a month now. You haven't seen much happen there. But we're still at around 1550. Are we still in fear and greed? Or are we still in greed? We are in greed 58. So it's not red enough yet to go down. Netflix 81.28. And again, markets are still at all-time highs. So it's not like March where these announcements were interpreted so badly that markets are just falling off a cliff. I mean, again, the earnings picture continues to be everything. It's just, it's more complications to that broader bull thesis. This is that analysis on the headline on OpenAI and Jalapeno. They're saying it outperformed NVIDIA GB300 in both throughput per watt and response latency in its testing. One thing I will say on this is that, and I'm pretty sure people in the chat agree, but I get really annoyed if ChatGPT takes a long time to answer my question. It's to the point where I'll send it 5 screenshots if I'm trying to ask a question on a picture or something, and I'll ask it to analyze and then summarize and give me some details. And it'll take 30 seconds and I'll be annoyed. And it's bro, I just sent it a lot of stuff. It needs a little bit of time to go through the inference. And I'm I want the answer immediately. And I think consumers are going to want more and more of the answer quicker than later, because obviously it's, more productive for us, without even us recognizing how aggressive of a prompt we're putting into these models and that we want our answer. So the fact, I think they know this, and they obviously want to fulfill that demand, because that whoever fulfills that demand is going to get the bulk of the consumer adoption. Is absolutely a first world problem. But the point is, if the entire world is going to be using these LLMs, the quicker it is, the more important, it needs to be. I think accuracy is more important than speed. That is fair. 100%. I would pick accuracy over speed any day of the week. But I do like it when it's, very quick and gives me what I need so I can move on. And I think that's part of the reason why, NVIDIA bought Grok, and why inference continues to be as relevant as it is. What do you think? Let's do a poll. How long do we think this Canada thing is going to last? Let's do it. How long? I know I'm not using deep thinking. Deep thinking, I know it takes long. Like deep thinking, I know it's like I should expect to wait a couple minutes, but usually it's pretty fast. But sometimes when I send it, a decent amount of stuff, and I still want an answer quickly, it takes like an extra 30 seconds, and it like kind of pisses me off, even though it's, it's obviously trying to figure this stuff out. How long do you think the Canada trade war lasts? Let's do 1 month. Let's do 3 months. Let's do until 2027. Let's do, it'll be done by September. Okay. So 1 month goes into October. September is sometime in the next few weeks. 3 months is like November, December. And then 2027 is, we're in January, February of next year, and it's still going. This week it gets resolved. Dude, I mean, if someone said, hey, would you bet on it being over by this week? I mean, I would put a lot of money, but there is a non-zero chance. Yeah, Trump tweets in a couple of days, we figured out a deal. Because we've seen this. We've seen this happen last year. I mean, they had a little tit for tat last year too, and it was resolved relatively quickly. It wasn't as aggressive as what they're doing right now, but still. I would not be surprised if it actually gets resolved. And, it's not really affecting the market, which is the good thing. The problem is the tariffs are inflationary in some sectors, especially energy, which Canada supplies a lot of that to us. And we already have enough energy inflation. So I think that's the bigger issue. Iridium has a lawsuit. That's what's creating concerns around Rocket Lab. I did not hear about that, but to be honest, that's a much better explanation for why Rocket Lab's been stuck. Warsh is forgetting his job right now. I think Warsh has been waiting to be the Fed chair all of his life. Like, if you care about the Fed, if you're in that ecosystem, like that it's like it's the best thing you could ever have happen to you. Like, you become the Fed chair. But I think he's also realizing he's dealing with a lot of stuff to be able to make this happen. NoFo, thank you for becoming, or NoFomo, thank you for becoming a channel member. Appreciate it. And thank you for being here. And the money says, did you get my email? If you could resend the email, that'd be amazing. Sometimes it gets hidden under. It's amit@akcoms for anyone who wants to send me an email. Yeah, if you just bump that email up, I will give it a look today. Okay, do we have anything else that's going on? We got the Canada stuff. We got Trump tweets on Canada. We have the bond market at least somewhat calming down. Krispy Kreme will offer its pumpkin spice original glazed donut starting August 27. Cactus, why did you send this? Cactus is a troll, bro. Is absolutely a troll. He knows we do not cover this stock. Dude, I don't like Krispy Kreme. I've had one of their donuts before. It's too sweet. There's too much glaze. Like, it's not, it just feels like you're eating sugar. So I will definitely not be trying their pumpkin spice glazed donut. You remember the stock? Ticker is DNUT. This stock had a run last year. Got up to like 20, right? Oh, this is end of 2024. Yeah, it got up to freaking 12 from like $2. Now it's at $3. but that has not made a move since then. Do you guys like Krispy Kreme? I don't. It's just too much sugar, dude. It's like it's way too much. Like, dude, do you guys see these videos on Instagram where like there's like these Dunkin' employees that have been making videos of like a day in their life, and they show like them making like a drink for customers. And some of these customers order like 7 pumps of sugar, 8 pumps of I don't know, whatever flavor, French vanilla or something. And I'm seeing these videos of them pumping all of this shit into like a large iced cup. And I'm just like, oh my, who drinks this stuff? Like, how could you drink that? It's like absolutely crazy. Yeah, that's what I feel like with Krispy Kreme. What about Tim Hortons? Well, you know, there's not that many Tim Hortons in the United States, but that is one thing I don't think we've gotten a chunk of from Canada, even though it is still pretty big in that country. MicroStrategy, that's up 3. Robin at 109. Nebius 216. Yeah, I don't think we have any other major headlines. It's mainly this Canada stuff today. That's the big thing. Amazon basically flat. The hyperscalers are flat. The semis are somewhat green to flat. Let's get an update on this Perplexity thing. It looks pretty obvious now that they will be investing if they're actually working together to build agents.
AI away from the cloud. Kate Rooney joins us with more. Kate.
Hey, Leslie. So as you mentioned, NVIDIA and then you've got AI startup Perplexity are making this push to bring AI directly to your desktop versus running it through all of the major cloud providers. So Perplexity this morning out with that announcement saying it's the first what they call full stack AI platform that can run entirely on local hardware, so local computers. It is going to run on NVIDIA's AI computer that's designed to really run some of these large AI models locally. It's called DGX Spark. Perplexity said during a demo that the hardware partners, more hardware partners, I should say, are going to be coming. And the pitch here that they're making is about lower cost. So instead of sending every prompt, every piece of data out to a data center, to a cloud provider, the AI can just run directly on this machine. So potentially lowers compute and then token costs, which is a big topic for a lot of CFOs we talk to, but also potentially help keep some sensitive data private. So you're not sending it out there to the cloud in this example. So Perplexity, though, still does say if a task is going to require more powerful frontier level reasoning, the system is still going to be asking a user for permission, and then it still needs to send a portion of that out to the cloud. So interesting note as well, it is going to launch on Alibaba's open source Qwen model. That will happen locally, and then it does say NVIDIA's open.
Wow. Perplexity launching this on an open source over a frontier lab tells you everything you need to know about why Jensen probably is investing in them, but also what NVIDIA is trying to send as a message. I mean, they are making sure open source is going to win.
Source model is going to be coming soon. Perplexity not alone here. We've seen Apple do this with the Mac Mini. It's been betting big on local hardware and AI, and then has this partnership with OpenClaw, if you remember the buzzy AI agent. And Microsoft is also pushing into some of these AI devices as well. The big question is going to be performance. So some of the most powerful AI models still do need to run in the cloud. Perplexity system itself will still need to send those harder tasks out to the cloud with user permission, as I mentioned. So not entirely going to be able to run locally. And then for NVIDIA, it is another signal. This company is positioning itself in every angle of AI, including some of these smaller local hardware plays. It does also come, guys, amid some M&A reports between these two companies. NVIDIA reportedly looking to buy Perplexity for about $30 billion. No comment from either company on that, but clearly getting closer on the partnership side. Back over to you.
Yeah, build it and maybe potentially down the road buy it.
Exactly.
Kate, I wanted to get your thoughts on the news out from OpenAI, which released some new benchmarks related to its Jalapeno chip, arguing it has better performance and energy efficiency than NVIDIA's counterpart. What do you make of that as we think about just this complicated web of the full stack of AI?
NVIDIA is everywhere, Leslie, every headline. Well, it's OpenAI in particular has been trying to diversify away from NVIDIA. I mean, we've seen this with Amazon. We've seen a lot more competitors, we've seen other companies try to basically NVIDIA is doing. And again, it gets back to the cost discussion. So for OpenAI, when they announced this, they said, in part, it's a way to lower their own costs as this company looks to go public. It's very important for margins that they're able to control the cost a bit more. But interesting on performance, I think a lot of the up and coming semiconductor makers are seen as sort of a cheaper option, maybe less competitive. If OpenAI is saying here that it is more cost efficient and better than NVIDIA, that's something to pay attention to, and also potentially a line of business for them. If it's not only for them internally, if they start to go out and sell custom semiconductors, that potentially bullish for OpenAI in an IPO if it's another revenue stream. And so clearly signaling that they're seeing momentum here. It's not just, for their own purposes. Could also be seen similar to what we've seen with Amazon as Andy Jassy's call it sort of a new pillar of that business. And so a lot of people have been paying attention to that. Interesting though, if they're giving updates on it, and clearly they are seeing some momentum based on what they're saying today.
Yeah, that would be an incremental tailwind, that's for sure. Pretty interesting. Kay, thank you, Kay Rooney, this morning.
All right, it looks like Perplexity is probably going to get some investment from NVIDIA, and that money will ultimately be going back to NVIDIA in the form of more compute and chips. Moderna is still up 12, S&P back to 765. The next kind of major catalyst as we get into the end of the day will be Intuit Zoom earnings, which Intuit for the software space, I guess, will be somewhat of a catalyst, but Intuit itself has been independently hit a bit harder than the other software names. And then Zoom, I wonder if they comment about their Anthropic stake, might also be somewhat of a catalyst for SaaS. Outside of that, I think it's just going to be updates on Canada, update from the Pakistani intermediaries about what's going on with Iran. Maybe we get some meaningful update given oil is down 4% today. So somewhat of good news could maybe compound that action to the downside, and $2 away from going below 80, that'd be bullish. The 10-year, if we could see that thing go down to 4.62, right now it's at 4.67. It's actually at 4.64, so it's down even further from where it was in the morning. So you actually do have some decent downside move from yesterday when it was at 4.74. NVIDIA, are we still at 211? We were at 210. And then we get ready for tomorrow, folks. That is going to be, honestly, the big catalyst for this week, even more than Kevin Warsh. Jose, Tanner, Neil, and I will be live at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to have to see what NVIDIA puts up. And if it can be some good numbers, then at least we can get through that overall catalyst, regardless of how the market acts towards it. All right, so that is it for me. I'll be back on the close. We will have Technical Tuesday after these earnings. And we'll keep going from there. We'll get Jason's perspective on what he thinks is going on with some of this more choppy consolidation that we are seeing. And, maybe we get that Bitcoin 80K run again, which obviously would help a lot of these crypto names that have made a bigger move. Word of the day, we found out yesterday. It was an unfortunate sequence of events that got us to find out yesterday, if you were on the market close, that ChatGPT now can say the word itself in the app, and I don't have to go to YouTube or a different website to learn how to say the word. It took me figuring out how to say ear canal. I know it's a little weird. It took a while. I thought it was canal, then I thought it was canal. Ended up, root canal, Panama Canal. I was like, oh, ear canal, because we were talking about the AirPods and the ear. But I figured it out, and yeah, ChatGPT helped us yesterday to figure it out. So that's what we're going to use to now figure out how to say these words of the day. Okay, today is atavistic, relating to the reappearance of an ancient or deeply ingrained behavior, especially one thought to have been outgrown. Atavistic.
Atavistic.
All right, whatever. Atavistic. Why? I always mess up on the or the or like on an E, it's like or a. I always get the wrong version of what it should be. When markets panic, investor behavior can become almost atavistic. Careful analysis gives way to fear, herding, and survival instinct.
Atavistic.
Atavistic. All right, that's what we got. now learn Estee Lauder. I'm actually right about that. I don't need any LLM to tell me how to say that one. That's it. Thank you all for being here. We'll be back on the market close with Jason for TT. We'll keep going from there, and then tomorrow we got NVIDIA. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you all. I'll see you guys on the market close, and then we'll be back tomorrow for the market open, and we'll keep going from there. Thank you, everybody. Have a good one. We'll see you guys in a few hours. Bye, everybody.